One.
Good evening and welcome to the 19th meeting of the Milton Planning Board for the fiscal year 2016. I'm Brian Furs. I'm the chair of the Planning Board, and I'm going to have the other members introduce themselves.
Alex Whiteside.
Julia Getman, clerk.
Tim Sherwinski, Assistant Town Planner.
Emily Ennis, member.
Okay, thanks. We're going to get started tonight. We have a fairly busy agenda. Our next meeting dates are going to be March 10th, March 24th, and then we also have April 14th and April 28th. We're going to have citizens speak. We have a new business item on the planning board level, which we will handle around our public hearings tonight. We have a public hearing at 7:15 to discuss our zoning articles that have been submitted for annual town meeting in May. We have an 8:30 public hearing for 545 Adams Street, which is a site plan approval. And we have a 9 o'clock public hearing scheduled for 1 Kinsale Lane, which is a subdivision revision, and that's been continued. We also have an old business item that we'll also handle around our public hearings tonight for 591 Blue Hill Avenue, which is an informational presentation. So with that, we'll move on to citizens speak. If there's anyone here that would like to speak this evening that is not planning to speak on one of the agenda items, can step forward now. All right, so seeing none, we will move directly into our public hearing, which is at 7:15, which is our zoning articles for the May 2016 annual town meeting. So we have three to discuss. We have the non-conforming business uses bylaw, we have the bed and breakfast bylaw, and we have the subsection L edit. So we will start with non-conforming uses. So we had an informational presentation last night on this non-conforming bylaw. It was well attended. We probably had 30 to 40 people. I didn't count the actual attendance list in attendance from the public, and it was a very good dialogue. The current situation with our, we have submitted a non-conforming business use bylaw to the selectmen for consideration. That bylaw is up for discussion tonight. The proponents, which include myself and member Cheryl Tagayas, have made recommendations for changes to be considered in our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, which the Planning Board has in front of them, and which we can go through in a brief presentation tonight. The Planning Board tonight is considering the submitted article, so the original non-conforming business use article. I, as a proponent, would recommend that we decide, we hear the presentation and then we decide which article we want to discuss as far as whether or not we want to recommend something to the, or what we want to recommend to the Board of Selectmen. So any other thoughts from the board? If not, we can jump right into the presentation and then begin discussions. Okay, great. So the presentation was made last night. We're going to abbreviate it just a bit for the purposes of the busy public hearing schedule by not going through the specifics of every single site. If people have specific questions, we can give you an idea of exactly what will happen from a square footage allowance on each site. But again, for the purposes of this hearing, we're gonna bypass that information that was given at last night's hearing. So moving into it, we want to just quickly talk about what the basis of the non-conforming use bylaw is in both versions. The goal of the proposed zoning is to really create a process that makes the cost of achieving redevelopment, reimagining, or in some cases small expansion of some of our small pre-existing non-conforming business sites, or all of our pre-existing non-conforming business sites under 2 acres, allow for a process that is more affordable and more really feasible for these smaller sites that may not be able to bear the cost of going to town meeting to create site-specific zoning for an individual site. Go ahead, Tim. Under our current process, we use our zoning bylaws that were adopted in 1938, which overlaid our town with residential zoning. There were sites throughout the town at the time that had pre-existing business uses that were in existence. Those sites became pre-existing non-conforming uses within a residential district. Essentially, that means that the use is allowed to remain, but changes to the use require approval of the Zoning Board of Appeal, and significant modifications to the site will require a variance or a town meeting process to create site-specific zoning to achieve the proper allowances for those improvements. According to our master plan, which was voted in last year, one of the charges is for the master plan to protect, preserve, enhance the quality and character of Milton and to guide future development. And the master plan specifically recommends addressing pre-existing non-conforming uses and dimensions, considering eliminating the need for variances and spot zoning, and have special permit process replace those, create buffer areas and mitigation measures where there is a conflict with surrounding conforming uses, provide small commercial uses in neighborhoods, increase and expand the range of housing types by creating smaller housing units, and streamline the permitting process. So the purpose of this bylaw as drafted was to really achieve many of those same initiatives that were outlaid in the master plan. As you can see here, most of those are listed as well as a few additions, like providing open space in neighborhoods and generating new tax revenue for the town and promoting walkable neighborhoods. So what will this bylaw do? Some of the things that this bylaw will do is proactively determine what Milton wants at its pre-existing non-conforming sites rather than having developers make proposals that the planning board needs to react to. It will allow small businesses to improve and expand without incurring the substantial at-risk costs that currently they face by going to town meeting for a zoning creation process. It provides a viable economic opportunity for property owners outside of 40B. It provides an ability for Milton to regulate businesses in a consistent way, including off-street parking, refuse storage, and set hours of operation. It creates property buffers to abutting residential properties that in many cases don't exist today, and it requires a substantial public special permit process. As we go through this, you'll find that a neighborhood process is actually required. A project must be found to be not adverse to a neighborhood, and it applies only to small neighborhood sites under 2 acres. Allowable uses would be anything currently allowed in a business district except for prohibited uses, which we'll go over here, open spaces, and residential uses on upper floors. Those could be condominium or rental units. They will have a provision that they can't be rented for less than 9 months. They must be at least 500 square feet, and then there must be an affordable housing component. Neighborhood involvement is required by this bylaw. Currently, there's no legal obligation for a developer to meet with a neighborhood. It is common practice, but this bylaw would actually require a neighborhood meeting. That meeting would be held with abutters and interested neighbors. The applicant then must come to the planning board and specifically detail all expressed concerns by the neighbors and indicate how each will be responded to. It doesn't necessarily require that a developer respond to those concerns, but it does require the applicant to suggest whether or not a concern is being responded to. So if an applicant says they're not responding to any of the concerns, that's an indication probably to the planning board that it's not consistent with what the neighborhood wants. Finally, there's a planning board public hearing required on a special permit, and that gives obviously a second public process for input on the record and in front of the elected officials. This bylaw will not create business districts. It will not permit specific projects. This is zoning. It doesn't provide any permits for a specific application. It does not take away neighborhood input as discussed, and it does not remove process as discussed. Prohibited uses are very similar to those that are currently prohibited in the business districts. We've added medical marijuana dispensaries and sexually oriented businesses, I believe, are already restricted. This gets into a little bit of the differences between what was originally submitted to the selectmen and voted by the planning board to go forward and the proposed changes to the bylaw from member Tagayas and I. Essentially, the major changes that have been that would be discussed tonight would be that non-conforming business uses would now be referred to as pre-existing non-conforming business uses. Non-conforming business uses would need to comprise at least 51% of the square footage currently on a lot. That is intended to really help with home-based businesses and making sure that home-based businesses are not included in this bylaw. Not-for-profit and institutional uses are also expressly excluded. Home businesses subject to Section 3A10 are expressly excluded. Under Section 3A10, home-based businesses of 400 square feet or under can get a 4-year permit from the town to operate. So therefore, those businesses would not be able to be considered a considered a pre-existing business and therefore subject to this bylaw. Lots of more than 2 acres are excluded. Lots could be expanded by 3 times their existing square footage up to 40,000 square feet. However, lots over 40,000 square feet could not be expanded. Special permits would require applicants to achieve at least 5 of the stated purposes. Originally, in the submission that's currently before the current submission to the selectmen said that only 1 purpose needed to be achieved. The height has been reduced to 35 feet across the board for all uses, and protrusions above that 35 feet for chimneys or HVAC units or the like decorative elements have been limited to 10% of the roof area. Individual buildings now are restricted to 12,500 square foot footprints. Originally that was uses, so this now requires smaller buildings in addition to limiting the size of a specific use. And finally, no underground or structured parking is allowed. That last provision was put in place in an effort to really force the good balance between the amount of parking, the amount of square footage on the ground, and then the amount of vertical development. If you allow for underground parking or parking in structures, that allows an applicant to really compress the parking into a much smaller area and therefore really increase their building area substantially. We want the parking that's required by a commercial use to be on the first floor, which would certainly be a good thing for retail uses, but it also constrains how much square footage can actually be built. This here is the list of properties that have been identified as qualifying under this bylaw. The list was compiled by work by the planning staff, the engineering department, and the assessor's office to determine pre-existing uses that have been noted by the assessor or by the engineering department for whatever reason to contain a business use that exists as of December 31st, 2015, which is the qualification for the bylaw. They're all under 2 acres, and with 5 exceptions, they're under 1 acre. I'll quickly read the names. 2 of the sites today were actually eliminated based on further research into the bylaws as proposed. So this list deals with sites under the proposed changes. It does not consider the sites that would be applicable to the bylaw as submitted to the selectmen. So this list has 18 properties. The Tedeschi Food Shops on Houston Avenue, the Pleasant Deli Market on Pleasant Street, Milton Yoga, which is at 12 Brush Hill Road, the intersection of Brush Hill Road and the Blue Hill Parkway, Milton Orthopedic and Sport, which is 191 Blue Hill Parkway, which is across Oak Street from the Tucker School, 2 Reedsdale Road, which is personalized preventative medicine, that's across the street from Pierce Middle School at the 5-way intersection, Bent's, which I think everybody knows at Pleasant Street and Randolph, 131 to 133 Brook Road, which is the Milton Food Mart and S&E Auto. The office buildings at 475 Adams Street, 487 Adams Street, 480 Adams Street, and 424 Adams Street. Those are all located in East Milton Square. 590 Randolph Avenue, which is the Tedeschi Food Shops. Blue Hill Power Equipment and Milton Auto Repair, which is at 940 Canton Avenue, just behind the Ullin Rink. Cultural Landscaping on Blue Hill Avenue, Eagle Farm and Greenhouse on Randolph Avenue, the McKean Oil or Blue Hill Ice site as it's become recently referred to as at 487 Blue Hill Parkway, and the Solomondo construction site at 1094 Blue Hill Avenue. So those are the 18 properties. Sorry, I could just flip back for a minute. 18 Breck Street and 6 School Street were considered part of this until today, when we were determined that in both cases the business uses occupied less than 51% of the square footage on the lot. So those both became excluded from the list. Okay, Tim, thanks. Current process to improve sites, these specific sites. So as there's no zoning to allow for the business uses today, we put together this chart to help people understand what the process would be. In the purple, you have sort of your baseline requirements. That's putting together the architectural renderings, the surveys, the plans, meeting with your attorney to come up with strategy, meeting with neighbors and abutters. All of that has to happen in any process. So that first purple category is going to happen for any project that's proposed. You then would have two choices here. You could go for a variance with the ZBA, or you could go into the town meeting process where you would create site-specific zoning. And then once you had gone through one of those processes, assuming you had been successful in achieving either a variance or site-specific zoning, you would then come to the planning board for a special permit, which would allow you to then, once you got your entitlements from the special permit and the Conservation Commission process, if applicable, allow you to apply for a building permit. So we'll go to the next slide, Tim. What I've learned, and certainly I think is relatively well known to most applicants, is that variance law in Massachusetts makes variances very difficult to achieve. They require a very high bar to be applicable to a site, and if they're appealed in the courts, the applicant is almost always not successful. The appellant would typically win. So the variance route is a very dangerous and very speculative route, and most people are not able to justify spending the time and money to take that route. So we've suggested that is a very complicated process, and certainly not many of the sites we've seen in the last several years have chosen to go that route. So we've moved to the next process, which would be town meeting. Town meeting is the process that we're the most familiar with in the town. And today, what we see is the town meeting process. In conversations with our applicants over the last couple of years, I spoke to Fair Nursery specifically, as well as the Woodmere at Brush Hill Road, as well as estimating on the chart that we had done. We expect that the process from beginning to end will cost somewhere between $100,000 to $160,000 and can take a year to a year and a half to get through. For sites of less than 2 acres, that's a very tall burden when most of that process is speculative. It makes it very difficult to justify any investment in those sites when you have to have such a large speculative process on the front end. So for that reason, we're suggesting that we eliminate the town meeting process and create good solid zoning that would allow, for these non-conforming sites, that would allow people to move directly into the special permit process. Go to the next. With that process, you still have a very expensive and time-consuming process that's still very speculative. It still requires good projects, an extensive process, and it gives the neighborhood and town plenty of power while making small projects more economically feasible. We believe that you have savings of somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000 in 24 to 58 weeks of process that you're saving there. And those numbers, again, are based on discussions we had with Fair Nursery, as well as the Northland Residential for Woodmere at Brush Hill. So those are the recent examples we used to get those savings numbers. We did a bunch of test fits for the sites, which show the ability to how much the sites could, how large the sites could be, as far as how much they could expand to, as well as how much square footage could be built on the sites. It'll take quite a while to go through all of those, which we did last night at the information session. What I'd rather do is have people let me know if the board wants to go through them, we absolutely can.
Did they go up on our website?
They were up on the website today.
Why don't you do one or two, Brian, just to...
Want me to do one or two?
Give
Why don't we do
people
the
an example
first
of
four
what it
where we
is.
actually have we have four that have the actual architectural rendering, and then we'll stop there just to give a flavor. Okay.
Yeah, just to give people a sense of what it is.
So we'll start with the McKean Oil or Blue Hill Ice site, which is the 487 Blue Hill Parkway. I think everyone's familiar with the location, but on the wall up here, the high school is right behind the football field there. This is across the street from the back entrance to the high school. This is the site today. And this chart I'm going to explain, which I didn't do last night until the end, and I'll explain it at the beginning this time. What we did here is we took the lot size and square footage, then based on the proposed changes to the zoning, and I believe the actual zoning that's in front of the selectmen, we require 35% open space. So on this site, you'd require 35% open space of your lot in this column, and that gets you your buildable area, the area that's not allowed for open space. We then used an industry standard of 350 square feet per parking space. That's a calculation that we sort of used to figure out how much tarmac you're going to need to accommodate a single parking space. That accommodates the vehicle space as well as the ratio of how much they'll need for driveways and aisles and whatnot. Plus, you require 250, you are allowed to build 250 square feet of commercial space per parking space. So therefore, we came up with a 600 square foot area per parking space. We divided the buildable area by 600 square feet to get to 92 parking spaces that you can accommodate. And then built the square footage in addition to that. So if you add up the 29,730 and the 55,212, in this case, I think this number is actually wrong, Tim. As I'm looking at it,
The subtraction of the parking spaces from...
yeah, the subtraction of the parking spaces didn't work here.
23,012.
Right. So this one, it's close. The important number, I think, here, you're getting about an ability to build about 23,000 square feet on the site with 92 parking spaces. That's what you could accommodate in that 55,212 number. On a maximum build-out, which would allow for residential, that 23,000 goes down to 16,000, but you could build 26 apartment units on floors 2 and 3 with 103 parking spaces. What Member Tagayas did with this information is she then did a massing plan to see what that would look like on the sites. So we can understand sort of visually what we're talking about. Not a design study per se, but certainly it's really just meant to be a one example of what the density could look like. So this here is the existing buildings on the site, and according to the allowed square footage built, this is what could be built on this site. This is one example of the density that could be allowed here. 98 Houston Street. 98 Houston is just off Thatcher. So it's between Thatcher and Blue Hill Parkway. This is the current look of the site. So this site would be allowed to expand. It's below 40,000 square feet, so it could triple its lot size. The 3 times the lot size was something that was thought out in looking at the different sites that could be affected by this bylaw. We looked at basically what the size of the lots adjacent to the site were. In most cases, if we allowed the lot to double in size, that was not large enough to accommodate picking up the neighboring site, so we made it 3 times, which would allow them to basically pick up the site next door and maybe a small portion of another site in most cases. In this case, if they did the maximum expansion under the bylaw, they could build 2,742 square feet of commercial space with 11 parking spaces. Maximum build-out with residential would be 19 square feet on the first floor with 3 units of residential and 12 parking spaces. And this is the massing study that we did. There's several iterations here to show if you expanded in either direction here. There's one example. For example, this building is 35 feet at its peak.
If you could just, if you go back, Ryan, you could explain like you did last night. One view is taking the home lot to the right, and one's taking the home lot to the left to expand.
Yep. So in this case, so go ahead.
That bleep did good, huh? That kind of showed it.
So there you go. This one is taking the site to the left, and then this one takes the site to the right, preserves the house on the left, and then we did another iteration of those two, another angle on those two. Milton Market and S&E Auto. This is 131 to 133 Brook Road, intersection of Brook Road and Blue Hill Parkway. This is the site in its current configuration. Again, allowed to expand up to 3 times, would allow 9,000 square feet on the first floor with 37 parking spaces. Maximum build-out would be approximately 6,300 square feet with 10 residential units and 41 parking spaces. Show the test fit. This is the existing condition today. For the reference, this is the site. This is the old Knights of Columbus facility, a private home, 2 private homes. This is a 3-family home here. So again, from a massing standpoint, that's the building and the amount of parking and open space you would have. And finally, Tedeschi's on Randolph Avenue. This is across from the new hospice building and the church at Randolph and Reedsdale. Site today. This site could expand, but it could not expand up to 3 times because there's a cap that you cannot expand above 40,000 square feet. So 40,000 square feet is the limit of this site for expansion purposes. That would allow a square footage area of 10,000 square feet and 43 parking spaces. Maximum build out with residential would be 7,500 square feet of commercial with 12 residential units and 48 parking spaces. And then we have probably 14 more that we can go through as people, if people have a specific question. Want to go back to the list to have behind us as we're talking?
Just to clarify that you are showing in the fit studies here the maximum build out.
Yes,
The
correct.
developer could choose to build less, but for the purposes of figuring out what can happen on the site, it's the maximum.
And just to
you're showing.
further clarify, it's the maximum build out under the proposed changes
Right.
to the submitted bylaw. So that is an important distinction. These test fits do not consider the build out that would be allowed under the larger initial submission, primarily because the proponents of that initial submission, at least 2 of the people of the 3 who voted for it and the 2 people who drafted it, Member Tagayas and Member Furs, don't believe it's worthy of going forward anymore. So not sure it's worthy of spending a lot more time discussing. So I guess my, what is the board's pleasure?
I'd like to see the location of these sites, please.
Okay?
Do you have that map that shows?
This is all 20 sites. So this includes School Street and Breck Street. Those have not been removed. Could you point out where those are, please, Tim?
Pull the pins.
Give me half a second.
Breck is, where's Pierce?
Yeah,
Breck
Breck's
is right
there.
here.
That's Breck, yeah.
School Street is not on here. School Street would be around here.
Okay.
So that's not
So
in
we
there.
took that one off, okay. Okay.
Okay, I have a short statement. Just, I've read the zoning. And have the people been given copies of the zoning, the proposed zoning?
Which zoning are we talking about? The draft?
What you're proposing, if people are
Proposed
going to
changes?
discuss it, they need a copy, but they also need time to read it. I don't believe it does what you say it does. I believe that it just doesn't. And I would be interested to find out why you continue to say the FAR should be 0.7 times the total acreage, when all your examples show an FAR far under that. In any event, I want to hear what the people have to say, not what the board has to say.
Well, I 100% agree with that, so.
Okay, great. Why don't we go to public comment? Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you. My name is Bob Sweeney. I'm a resident of Whittier Road, town meeting member, precinct 9. My comments will be brief. I am opposed to the zoning proposals for the Maytown meeting. And the reason for that is I believe that currently our site-specific zoning has done this town very well and has protected the residential character of Milton. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Sloan?
Hello, my name is Joe Sloan. I live on 55 Concord Avenue, and I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 10. I wanted to say, first off, thanks for the meeting and presentation that you had last night at the high school. I think I found it very helpful, very informative. I learned a lot. I think a lot of people learned a lot, and I think there were some really good comments that came. So I think that's a really important element of the process. I immediately last night was put on edge by one of the first slides that you came up in the presentation. It was here tonight that basically introduced what the purpose of this proposed zoning revision is, and the specific phrases that I was concerned about. You described that the current process is flawed, that the bylaws that were put in place in 1938 gave no consideration for existing businesses, and that the process is all about cost and fairness. I'm concerned about those comments coming from the planning board, because when I watched those first few slides, I thought maybe I was in the wrong place and that it was much more appropriate for possibly a business roundtable than a presentation to residents. It was a presentation to residents and what their interests might be, as opposed to a presentation to developers. In fact, we do have a bylaw in Milton that we've had for years, and it deals with non-conforming properties, and it's pretty straightforward, I think pretty easy to understand. It says that non-conforming uses may be extended for a purpose that's substantially similar. I think that's the important phrase. It's substantially similar to the purpose for which the original buildings may have been lawfully used. So if the use today, or the proposed use today, is the same or similar to what it was years ago, let's say a food market, that was an example we talked about last night, and the Tedeschi's on Houston was an example that kind of reinforced this, that our understanding is that it's always been a food market and it is a food market now. So we're all set. But if something substantially different from that original use is proposed, then the proponent has to make a case before the town. If it's time-consuming and it's costly, that's the proponent's responsibility. It's not really the resident's problem that the process is burdensome. The current bylaw exists and is in place to protect the neighborhoods, plain and simple. And it's not unique to Milton. It mirrors state law, and it mirrors the bylaws in virtually every city and town across Massachusetts. There's a provision in the law that says if a non-conforming property use is discontinued or the term is abandoned, then that property reverts to underlying zoning. So in our case, that's primarily residential. So another good example here in town is the former florist and greenhouse property on Blue Hill Ave that has been disused for at least 15 years. I don't know the exact number, but I drive by there every day, and it certainly hasn't been used as that business for many years. So that property under the law has reverted to residential. Someone can build a house on that lot if they choose, and in fact, I think that's the last item on your agenda, is the proposal of somebody that's proposing to build a house there. That's all well and good. That's the way the bylaw works. Any of the neighbors who live in the immediate vicinity of a non-conforming business, I think would be grateful that these zoning protections exist. The bar is high, as you said, and it needs to remain high. Milton is an excellent residential community, and the advantage always needs to stay in the residential homeowner's court. I think that the most worrisome aspect of this zoning is the provision to allow these businesses to expand and buy adjacent residential properties. In fact, the expression in the language of the bylaw is to actually promote the expansion. This could enable someone to buy adjacent residential properties, as you've shown, to increase the size of the lot by, in some cases, as much as 3 times. Existing small buildings that are on some of these sites could be replaced with buildings that are much larger. And off-street parking lots could appear in neighborhoods that don't have any off-street parking lots. Decisions about what types of business could occupy a site, whether apartments or condominiums would be built in the floors above, or whether houses would be replaced with parking lots, would be a decision or decisions left to the planning board during the special permit process. Alex has pointed out, and other people have pointed out, the proposed zoning as it's written does not establish any standards or measurements for how those decisions would be made. There's nothing to say how you would quantify a decision about what business would be appropriate there. The proposed zoning covers a very large number of properties that are clustered in a part of Milton that's already very densely built and has existing traffic patterns that are well known. We talked about that last night, and a few speakers brought that up. There's a lot of properties in our neighborhood, in our part of town, that this would affect. I think that to properly test whether this zoning concept would work, a planning effort similar to what was done down in the Central Avenue area, which would give residents and professionals the opportunity to envision scenarios, and talk about what the residents might see appropriate for a neighborhood and what they might see as problems. We need to hear from the residents. It's unfortunate that all we hear from consistently are the developers and the attorneys, who take much more time at these microphones than the residents do. We also should encourage, as was discussed last night, a town-wide traffic assessment that could be a reference document to help determine what traffic impacts of any of these properties could generate and whether they could be added to the existing traffic burdens. And this would apply to anywhere in town. Anywhere that a project comes up, a proposal comes up, there are traffic concerns. Sometimes if a process is encouraged far enough, and maybe to the special permit process, a traffic study exists, but very often they're very specifically to the area where that proposal is, and doesn't encompass the other areas. We have the potential here for a number of sites to be developed to all affect traffic patterns in unique ways. If half of them were built, the traffic could result in this. If they were all built, it could result in this. And the people who know the best are the people who live here, the people who see the traffic patterns and deal with them every day. I think these conversations are good. I welcome the opportunity and the dialogue. I think the zoning amendment is not ready. I encourage more discussion so that residents can truly understand what's being put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No.
Hi, I'm Carol Stocker from 291 Hillside Street, and I want to second what John Sloan just said. I think it's a very one of the concerns that we have in this town is traffic flow, and I haven't really heard enough about, in considering where you're going to do development, as to looking at the flow of traffic in the town and how that would be affected, and whether we would be improving it or creating more log jams. And you know, log jam is very easily created without real forethought. Secondly, anything that involves development makes me very nervous from my 35 years in the town, my experience. For instance, I live in a residential area, and most of my experience has been with residential developers, but they're always looking for loopholes. And you very often end up with the worst case scenario. For instance, There was an estate behind my house, and the woman who owned it, when she sold the estate, she kept a couple of acres with a horse barn in it, deep in the woods with no frontage, in case she wanted to keep a horse in town. She never did. And after a number of years, she sold it to another horsewoman who said she wanted to use this barn, which was completely landlocked, no chance of development, supposedly. So she sold the barn and the land to this other horsewoman for $60,000. No, she sold it for $40,000. Then that woman flipped it to a local developer for $60,000. He went through all the courts to change the laws so that throughout the state of Massachusetts, you can now have one-house subdivisions, and which means you can develop a landlocked parcel that has no frontage, and this is going to affect developers in such parcels throughout the entire state of Massachusetts. But it was well worth his while to take it through the courts, because he flipped that piece of land that he bought for $60,000 for almost $1 million, undeveloped. And now there's a big McMansion going up there. These kind of experiences, and this is not the only one, make me terrified of loopholes when you start messing around with zoning. And I just think that you have to really plan defensively and really tweak it. And it may sound good, but you got to think of it from the point of view of somebody who's thinking, if I can find the loophole, I'm going to make $1 million. So I just am very chary about supporting this as is. And again, the traffic consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
Hi, Karen Friedman Hanna, 3 Norway Road. I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 2. I think that the comments that have been said already actually make a lot of sense. I don't discount any of them, but I sat in on those meetings that we had more than a year ago when we were trying to come up with a new master plan, and the dialogue and the excitement that was generated in the room when we were all sitting together with some people we knew, some people we didn't know, people from all different parts of the community. The common theme was, oh, it would be so great if we had more little spots within our neighborhoods or within an area not too far from our neighborhood that we could access. That could be little shops, little coffee place, little community area where we could meet. That was such a prevalent common theme that kept coming up. And people were rejuvenated when they left there thinking, oh, Milton actually could become a little bit more vibrant than it currently is. And in speaking with my neighborhood, which the turnover has been dramatic in the last 2-3 years of young families moving in, they all have said, while they love Milton as a residential community, they bought into it, they moved in here from various places, they were feeling very much that, oh my goodness, there is such limited access to stuff here, and that would make it just great. So while I know that there needs to be caution with the way that we go forward, if we are so cautious that we never go forward, that is as bad as if we do it wrong. We have to go forward, in my mind. We have to keep Milton vibrant. We have to make ways for us to have additional funds, resources coming into the town, because we are so cash-strapped at this point. The schools are strapped, the police are strapped, the fire is strapped, everybody is strapped. If we don't come up with ways to bring in additional revenue sources, we are going to only get more strapped and have less services, and our town will start really feeling the negative brunt of that. So I totally agree we need to be cautious, but I am so in favor of moving forward in a thoughtful way to bringing pockets of business in a very planned way so that there's some cohesion with neighborhoods and not overdoing it where there's too much of one thing and nothing of something else. I think that we really can be very smart about bringing additional business into Milton, and I really applaud the effort in what you're doing to try to make that happen. And I hope that we can come up with a way that helps to soften the negatives that some people are feeling so that they feel confident in the process, because that's absolutely important. But I am very much in favor of moving forward with pockets of businesses within the town. So thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Oops, sorry. I'm Cynthia Schmarzo. I live at 45 Aberdeen Road. I'm not a town meeting member, my husband is, but I've lived in this town for 25 years. I'm very visual, and I see most of the development spots are on some of the major byways that go through our town. Coming out of Aberdeen Road on weekday mornings around 8 a.m., the traffic is backed up to Aberdeen Road, which is 7/10 of a mile from Mattapan Square. So I'm also trying to visualize a tractor-trailer truck trying to deliver goods to these places. And my first one was trying to picture a tractor-trailer truck making a turn at the end of 138 at Blue Hill Parkway, which is a hairpin turn. I cannot see the town allowing tractor-trailer trucks to travel on Canton Avenue and turning down. I don't know. And I think I just see a lot of clogs, particularly with 37 and 43 parking spaces. That's a lot. That's a lot of traffic. I'm not opposed to a coffee shop, and that's fine, but that would not include extending the properties beyond what they currently are. And the Parkway, I'm sure some people are thinking, oh, the elders over at Winter Valley can go over to the parking, to the market, but you'd need a bridge because that's 4 lanes of traffic. And I, for 10 years, commuted down the Parkway every evening and set my speedometer so I would go the appropriate speed because I know I can be a little heavy-footed. And people were constantly speeding by me at 45, 50, 55 miles an hour. It's not particularly safe. There is a bike path. I moved to this town knowing it had little tax base, and in my reviews of other towns, I don't have numbers particularly, our tax rate is not that high, and compared to a lot of other towns who have far less services, far better school systems, and I'd like to see it stay. There's plenty of services, a supermarket. There are 3 supermarkets within 1.25 miles or 1.5 miles from my house. I don't need one on the Parkway. There's 2 in Hyde Park. There's 1 in Mattapan Square for those who venture there, which I've found not a whole lot of people from Milton will go, who are not diverse, will venture into Mattapan Square. There's a bank, there's a post office, there's a CVS, and a supermarket, and clothing stores, and dollar stores. There's plenty of things to do there. My main concern, because I am visual, is seeing the traffic, seeing large spaces of parking that would not be necessary for a coffee shop or, something like that. And I just can't see, and I'm willing to always pay for an override because I've always felt that it's worth every penny to have a place where you can go that's not a hubbub of near the city. If I wanted to live in Jamaica Plain or someplace like that where I could walk to all these amenities, then I would move there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Maggie Oldfield, and I live at 237 Hillside Street. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9, and at least for today, I am fortunate enough to say I'm a second-generation business owner here in Milton. I have grown up in Milton, attended all the public schools, and now I'm trying to raise my kids in the same manner as I was. They are actually very tired of hearing me tell my childhood stories and have noted that back in the day seems so much better than today. And as more time goes by, I believe they are right, especially with regards to the support that local business and tradespeople receive. There have been many local entrepreneurial role models in my life. Professionally, the Thomas family has always set the bar high and has exemplified true professionalism in our field. Personally, my grandmother, Anna Oldfield, owned and operated a nursery school out of her home on Pleasant Street for over 30 years. I am sure she did not hold any permit in hand. And my husband's mother and grandmother started the Nutshell and the Little Book Room in its original location in the historic Swift Hat House. They have always supported the community that supported them. But of course, nothing molded my life than seeing my father grow Thayer Nursery literally in our backyard. My childhood memories are filled with visions of him in the Bobcat planting trees at 9 p.m. After a full day of landscaping other people's homes, he would return to his home for a quick bite to eat, where he would then head out to the nursery in his Bobcat to get those trees in the ground. When we were big enough, we would help him plant the trees in straight rows. My sister Amy, who had special needs, would push her wheelchair out to the field and sit and watch him for hours. She would roll her chair into the bucket and get a ride inspecting our work. It was our time to be together as a family. I am unable to repeat these same memories with my family now, for fear of ending up in court on a zoning violation. I used to think I was fortunate to own a business in Milton, but now my opinion has changed. Today, it seems to me that the town of Milton does not support the entrepreneurial spirit and actually penalizes those of us who have it. It is sad that we are punished for wanting to work. I was excited to hear that you were drafting new zoning that will not only protect our existing businesses, but our American dream. This should have been done years ago. However, to my disappointment, this bylaw actually will not protect those of us who have been part of this multi-generational family business. Because of the random and arbitrary restrictions and requirements you included, this bylaw disqualifies some of us. It seems to me you have cherry-picked certain businesses to protect, and you have purposely left some of us out. It frustrates me further that you are considering endorsing a bed and breakfast, which is totally a new business type, in a residential neighborhood, and you are not supporting existing business types. How can you encourage new businesses without giving support to the existing ones? In my very limited experience in writing zoning, I have come not to trust the process. I'm disappointed in how the process for creating the parameters for this bylaw has been executed. Business owners, families, and neighbors have all been left out. Today, I reached out to a couple of business owners whose names appear on the list you provided, and none of them have been contacted for their input. How can a bylaw be drafted without the input from the very people that it will affect the most? I would like to know what your definition is of a small business. I also take great offense to statements that have been stated several times. It is an inaccurate presumption that business owners on small parcels of land, in your definition, a small parcel is less than 2 acres, need more help from you and are more financially challenged to reinvest in their business than those of us who sit on over 2 acres. Have you ever heard of the saying, land rich and cash poor? That is what most business and land owners are, especially those of us on larger size lots. With larger size lots come bigger expenses. We can hardly wait for this new stormwater utility fee to kick in. The process that I have personally been through with this board has been literal economic hell for my family. We should have sold to any one of the developers who have approached us through the years, and we still may have to. My business and my family will never financially recover from what the town has put us through. We are barely hanging on now. You guys report as to the hard costs associated with the business going through this process, like attorney and engineering fees, but you have not factored in all the other costs I have had to endure for over a 2-year process. It is not appropriate for the board to make statements regarding business owners' financial situations, and it certainly is not appropriate for the board to be so exclusive. Even though I do not support this bylaw, I believe it is a start. A bylaw does need to be crafted in some form. A well-structured and clearly articulated zoning bylaw should provide all existing non-conforming businesses with a sound foundation for the business as it exists today, while providing flexibility for the business to respond to change so it can be proactive in defining and maximizing opportunities to develop and grow in the future. I believe this task is too big for you to tackle by yourself. Even though you are all exceptionally talented professionals with many resources, you don't have the time or really the personal dedication that some others may have. Perhaps some type of group, like an economic development group, needs to be formed to help you work through all the issues. Milton is fortunate to have so many smart and creative people who want to participate in making our town better. This group would be tasked with reaching out to all the non-conforming business owners and bring them together with the neighbors. Together, we can identify the types of businesses, especially the independents, not any chain stores, that are missing in Milton, and what neighborhoods are best suited for these businesses. It is better for both sides to be proactive over a cup of coffee than reactive in front of a judge. Trust me, I know. Interestingly, business owners and neighbors have the same fears and concerns. I think if both parties can find answers together with your direction, then we will all feel more at peace with our futures. We will know what we can expect, and we will be able to plan around it. Change is very unsettling, and it causes so much conflict. So why not create a bylaw that will help alleviate some of it for everyone and not just for a few?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Kernan, Brush Hill Road, President of the Brush Hill Area Neighborhood Association. I've got a couple things. First of all, Milton is a unique town, and we all should be pretty pleased that we live here. The master plan, I think, made an effort to identify some of those unique characteristics. And I don't see that this particular bylaw identifies these particular lots that are pinned up here on the screen and how they fit into the master plan, what unique characteristics those lots or those neighborhoods may have relative to the master plan, and whether or not there may need to be a specific prescription for each of those lots to be able to preserve the characteristics that they bring to the town. So this approach is too broad brushed, it does not allow for the individual characteristics of each of these lots to be identified and maximized. And it may be that some of these lots should revert to residential use, some of them may need to revert to commercial use. So that's sort of number one. Number two is it seems that this bylaw is intended to speed and streamline the work of developers and not necessarily to help protect the town. We talk about the costs of development, but we don't talk about the cost of the impact to the town. And I think that's an unfortunate position for the board to take, and I wish that they'd begin to look at the prior comments that I made before. I think there's a big illusion here that people need to keep in mind, and that is that we all talk about how great it would be to have little commercial developments within our neighborhood. But you've got to look at what the economics of those commercial enterprises may be. I think that you'll find that many of these enterprises will have such a small revenue base that they may not be able to exist in the form that we hope they would be. And I don't think they'll have a revenue base that's going to support the taxes that we think that commercial enterprises are going to develop. So I think that as we look at these lots and think that they're ideal candidates for commercial development, you need to look at what types of commercial development might go into these lots and what type of revenues may they generate. I don't think they're going to materialize in the form that we're anticipating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Denny Swenson, 65 Green Street. I have a couple questions on the non-conforming business use article. I was wondering if the bed and breakfast properties might end up falling under the non-conforming business use in the future. Has that been thought through?
The question actually came up, yes. Why don't you ask all of your questions and then I'll answer
Oh,
each
sure.
one of them, yeah.
Okay. Have the abutters of the 19, well now, I guess 18 properties, received any notice of the proposed article? Was my second question. I would suggest that not only the abutters, but the neighborhoods that are most impacted by these changes receive direct notification of this article. I would also suggest that they receive the updated version of this article. Currently, the only version of the article posted on the planning board website is the original version that the planning board has apparently moved beyond. The most recent version of this article requires only one public meeting for neighborhood input before permitting. Then it calls for the developer to draft a list of the neighborhood concerns and whether or not the developer will address these concerns. The way that a developer characterizes or proposes to remediate neighborhood concerns is often quite different than the way a neighborhood would. A recent example is with the Pope's Pond project. The attorney of the developer presented that the neighborhood was in support of the project and that the neighborhood concerns were being addressed. But at town meeting, there were numerous neighbors stating that they hadn't even been informed of the project, and all who spoke at the town meeting were opposed to the project as it was conveyed to them. I'm not suggesting that the attorney intentionally misled the planning board, but it's an example that suggests the approach of the developer presenting the neighbors' concerns can blow up on the planning board or on the town. And so yesterday, while Brian and Cheryl said that they would never move forward on a development that a neighborhood opposes, there's nothing in the document that stops future planning boards from using their discretion to override or minimize neighborhood concerns. So if protections are not included in the document, could a developer claim that they have checked all the boxes in the zoning and then the planning board is denying permit for arbitrary and capricious reasons? So that's my third question we'll get back to. Even if the neighborhood concerns are legitimate, are we clear that under this proposed article that the developer would not have a cause of action for denying the special permit? It would seem that the article takes away the procedural protections in our current residential zoning, but offers little in return as far as protections go. So there are pros and cons to doing that, and I respect a speedier, less costly process in a neighborhood where there is an eyesore and an owner who wants to improve upon the property is great. Most people would support improvements in the neighborhood, but what an outsider might think is an improvement for a neighborhood might come with drawbacks that they wouldn't think of from the outside looking in. The good news is that the neighbors know their neighborhoods, and neighborhoods have demonstrated that they want constructive input. The article only requires one public hearing for the neighbors, but that could mean anything. Who gets notified? How much notice is given? What is the process for neighborhood involvement? The neighbors might be fine with a variety of improvements, but just not the one that's being proposed by this particular developer. Could the proposal provide a procedural way for the neighborhood and the developer to work together? This sort of takes into account some of what Maggie was describing in her situation. You know, could we come up with a procedural way for neighborhoods and developers to work together? So that's my fifth question.
Okay, is that the final question?
Yes.
Okay. So going through your questions, so do bed and breakfast properties qualify? It's a great question. One of the, I can't answer the question right off the top of my head, but apparently Emily can.
Just, I think in your proposed changes that you and Cheryl made, you put a limit of the business had to be December 31st, 2015.
Okay.
So if the bed and breakfast were to pass in May or even October of this year, depending on what town meeting does, assuming it passes, it would not have been a business that existed in December 31st, 2015. So under your proposed changes, it couldn't become, as I understand your proposed
Yeah.
change, it couldn't
Right.
become that.
Yeah, that's
Right.
correct.
Under what's in front of, what's on the art warrant now, I suppose it could be a possibility because there's no date limit.
Where
So-
does it say that?
The new,
I remember you saying you put the date in. I unfortunately don't have a printout of the new version. Thank you.
I need my glasses for this.
I don't think it does
it doesn't
say
say
that.
It doesn't,
that,
you had,
actually.
you hadn't put it in the,
That's
So
with regard to the
a
law.
bed and breakfast
Oh, that's
would
the law.
qualify.
Right. So,
but it wouldn't because it's not a pre-existing non-conforming use. If the bed and breakfast actually passes, it would
Pre-existing.
have a variance from the, or it would have a
would.
special permit from the
Right,
ZBA.
and it would
So it's
be
not a,
on the lot for 2 years prior to application.
okay, then that is, that does not, I'm sorry, that doesn't conform with my understanding of what you guys
Yeah, I
have
think-
done. So then I think that's an open question that
it's
we
an
need to
open, it's an
consider.
open that I was going to raise for later, but go ahead, Alex.
Yeah.
You know, having the document and having time, I mean, I've read it, could I finish? Having the document is important when you're discussing the document, and I think the people here should have been given the document at the beginning of this hearing if this is what we were going to discuss. I mean, I'm happy to discuss it. I don't think, I think a bed and breakfast, in fact, would qualify
And that-
under the language here.
Okay. In that
But,
case, yeah.
you know, if we'd all had time, this language was produced 3 days ago, or it may have been produced more than 3 days ago, but I first saw it 3 days ago, and some of the people here may have seen it yesterday, and other people have never seen it at all. So, but that's all I'm saying. I mean, I'm happy to discuss the language. It's too bad that there aren't more people who can join in the discussion.
I'm going to continue to answer the questions before we go to,
Finish that.
public discussion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Sorry, so that, the answer to your question is, it seems like they may. But we have to get to the
So
bottom
that's a
of it.
work in progress.
Yes, that's a work in progress, that's
for
correct.
sure.
Have the butters received notice? There was no specific notice given out to butters or neighborhoods here. There was a fair amount of communication, but there was no specific notice given. So the answer to that question is no. Your third question, can a planning board overrule the neighborhood? I think the answer to that question is yes. And can they do it arbitrarily and capriciously? The answer is yes, but I'm not sure that would be a wise decision for the planning board. But the answer to your question is that the planning board could do that, sure.
Well, no, the question was if protections
Well,
are not
they can
included.
do it. They can't necessarily.
I thought so. That wasn't
Oh,
the
okay.
basic-
Yeah, it wasn't
What
the
was your
question,
question? Okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought that was your
That's
question.
okay.
So-
We'll clarify. If protections are not included in the document, could a developer claim that they have checked all the boxes in zoning and that the planning board is denying the permit for arbitrary
I
and
see.
capricious
I'm
reasons?
sorry, I missed that part of it.
Okay.
Okay.
It's part two to the question, too, if you have patience for me. So even if the neighborhood concerns are quite valid, but they haven't been addressed in the document, are we clear that under the proposed article, that the developer would not have a cause of action for denying the special permit?
I don't feel comfortable answering that question, but
I don't know the answer.
I think it's something I've thought about, so
Yeah.
I think the answer is yes. I think under the present process, like Brian pointed out, a variance is very difficult, so people try to write a site-specific zoning for the property. So as they come to us, they have no given right to do I'll talk in generalities, but my understanding is they haven't been given a right to do anything. So they write a zoning to allow them to do it. And in the process of doing that, we could deny them for pretty much any reason, because they didn't start out with a right. If this zoning's in place, and like, I'll use some of your language, if the developer comes and says, I've met every requirement in here, and every neighbor and everybody in town says, I don't want it, that's arbitrary and capricious. You better come with a real good legal reason that he hasn't met all the requirements of the zoning, because if he has, then your opinion is just that. So you can go home with it, because he can do what he, otherwise he's gonna say, you're being arbitrary and capricious. You've set a guideline of rules, I've met them, I really don't care what people say after that. I mean, I'm being overly emphasizing my point, but I don't think anybody's gonna come and say, I don't give a damn what you say, but in reality, that's the position they're in. So today, the public can come to us and say, we don't like it. We don't think it's gonna be aesthetically pleasing to our neighborhood. We don't think it's gonna fit into the character of our neighborhood. And we can say to the developer, unless you can get around this, then you better come to us with something different.
That's the way it is with our residential
That's the way it is
zoning.
today.
That's the way it is today. But if you introduce this new language, and this new language doesn't cover, or where the developer.
Doesn't say,
You made a good point with the bed and breakfast. That's a loophole that you just pointed out to us, that I'm not even specifically concerned with that. I'm just concerned with the fact that you've already punched a hole in it. And it isn't even got off ground one, you've already punched a hole in it. A developer is gonna come in and, like we've got it, they spend lots of money and lots of lawyers.
Well, you could have a bed and
punch a lot of
breakfast go
holes.
into
Okay,
place,
we're
and in 2
We're not going
years.
to go back and forth, sorry, that's not allowed under the public session. Cheryl, you had
I
a comment?
just want to make a comment about the first thing you said, Mike, because property owners do have rights under the zoning. Otherwise, somebody purchased a piece of property, they wouldn't know what they could do with it, including a single-family home. So people do have rights, and even the non-conforming businesses have certain rights now. So I think that's a little bit of a mischaracterization. I just want to clarify.
Well, what I said was when they come for a special permit, if somebody owns a gas station today and they want to turn it into a, I don't know, anything, that they're coming to us for a special permit. They don't have a right today to say, I want to turn my gas station into an airplane parts shop. I don't know, whatever. They just don't have a right to do that. They don't have a given right any place in the zoning. With this new zoning, you're saying they have a right to change the business to anything but a sex shop, a marijuana shop, or this. So they could come to you and say, I want to turn my gas station into an airplane shop, and I've met all the requirements, your square footage, and I've got the parking spaces. How can you refuse me? You're being arbitrary and capricious. I've met your rules. You set the rules. I've met them.
The only counter I would give to you, and
So I didn't say they don't have rights. I said under a special permit, they don't have a written ahead of the process right to do things yet, to change things.
The only counter I would give to you is the zoning does, as proposed, say that it has to be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood and it can't be adverse to the neighborhood. I think if you had entire negative support from the neighborhood, there would be grounds to deny a special permit based on that.
And I know, Brian, we don't want to get back and forth, but
Right.
the lawyer, they'd get lawyers come and say, it does meet the character. You're using an opinionated situation to tell me I can't do something.
you think there should be better standards.
We're in a worst case
But
situation.
I'll just
Sorry.
make a last
Emily?
point, and I'll shut up for a good bit of time. And I make points that I know you guys hear over and over, but I just like to make it to the general public. Again, in a town that would put up a map and say, we've got 900 sites like this. We've got 50, we've got 1,000. We don't know how many sites there are like this. We couldn't count them for you in particular towns. We've got 18 sites. Last night, you volunteered the fact that a couple of the sites you brought up, there's very outside probability that they're going to do anything. So when we get down to it, how many sites do we really have that this zoning bylaw is written for? A dozen? And at that point, I'd like to just interject, I do appreciate the effort, and I don't undermine the effort that you guys have, the time, it has to be appreciated. But if there's a dozen reality of sites here, I don't see why the process needs to be corrected for a dozen sites. You know, and I'm using an arbitrary number, but I'm trying to put it in some kind of perspective here.
Emily?
I know you want to get back to answering Denny's question, so I'll just make this brief. I think the value of a public process like this is they put forward a draft, they put forward a second draft that already addresses a lot of concerns that we're getting. The value of this public process is it allows all of us to continue to go through and say, what are the unintended consequences, which is always a huge question when you write new zoning, is if you're writing it, what are the unintended consequences? You've identified one. If B&B passes, does this then apply? And then that makes us say, okay, let's step back and have a look at that. And I think that was very valuable. Then the other one is, are the protections that were anticipated in the drafting, are they actually strong enough? Are the standards strong enough for what the intent of the zoning was? And again, that's where we're continuing to hope as a board to hear from you, to have among the discussions of ourselves, and to see if that's where we should be, or if the language needs to be further modified to put in those protections. So I appreciate you bringing these issues up.
I agree with that. Cheryl, briefly?
Just briefly, I'm sorry I had a conflict that was unavoidable tonight. I couldn't be here earlier, but I just want to make a comment that we put forth the language as a starting point to start the conversation and discussion. And last night we got good feedback, and we got good feedbacks before last night, and we expect to get good feedback tonight and to continue to work on the article. And then when it is time for it to go to town meeting, then it will have been for a lot of work, and then the town meeting can decide whether they think it's worth pursuing. But I think at this time what we're trying to do is put forth a dialogue, and that's why it's valuable. I'm glad to see a lot of people here, and I hope to continue to get good feedback.
Did you have a fourth question? I'm sorry, I think you did, and I didn't write it down.
That's okay, that's great. This sort of overlaps with some of what Maggie was saying, but is there a procedural way for the neighborhoods and the developers to work together? I mean, in a number of instances, but there may be, a developer might come forward and say, we think this is a great place for a supermarket, and they might say, we already have 4 supermarkets nearby. What do you think of, I don't know, an ice cream shop, or you know what I'm saying? And so is there a procedural way that the planning board and the town can support the neighborhoods and the developers working together?
I think we tried, and I think we tried to create that here, and maybe we didn't go far enough. Currently, there's no process required for a developer to go to a neighborhood. They could submit for a permit to one of the boards and move forward and use this as the forum to go with the neighborhood. So we tried to do that by requiring a neighborhood meeting, and perhaps we need to go further, so we'll take that under advisement.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Denny.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody else for the comment on this? Okay.
Hello, my name is Stephen Wells, a resident of Canton Avenue, 940. I'm also the business owner at 942 and 944, which is Blue Hill Power Equipment and Franny's Corner Gas Station. As a business owner and as a resident, I am just surprised that we haven't heard anything about this meeting last night. I was told by 2 other business owners today. I contacted 2 or 3 others that knew nothing about it. And I'm just surprised. I do remember Alex many months back saying that they were going to try something like this when they were having all the issues with the landscape locations, and just never heard anything else about it. So someone that is a resident that's also running a business, it's very difficult, because anything you do, your neighbors are right there. Traffic, I have plenty of it with a gas station. Deliveries next door with auto parts, plenty of traffic. We sneak 12,000 gallons of gasoline down Canton Avenue every 7 days for over 75 years, and there's never been one incident. So I think what you're doing is a great idea. I think it's rushed a little bit. I thought by rumors today that this was going to be voted on tonight to be sent to the town meeting. It doesn't sound like that's the case.
It's already been voted on to be sent to town meeting, and this is to determine whether or not what the board's recommendation is on it being sent forward. But it was sent to the warrant.
Right.
Okay, so as a business owner and a resident, I don't think you did a good job of notifying the residents of this to happen, or the business owners that it was going to happen. Even though it is to help the business owners, I imagine it's to help the residents as well. I think that maybe a better job would be to let more people know that this is going on. Because even the littlest thing can really upset a neighborhood. Being a father with 2 kids that I have to get on the bus every morning from the time they were 5 till now in high school, a stop sign that turned into a traffic light made the difference of a line from Blue Hills Parkway to Robin Street every morning of stopped cars turned into a highway of the bypass of 128. We now have so many cars going down Canton Avenue in the morning at 35, 40 miles an hour, trying to get through that traffic light before it turns red. I had to have my son's bus stop changed from Sumner Street side of Canton Avenue to my side of the street because I had to go out there with him every morning to try to cross him without him getting killed. And it was very difficult. The town's idea was, well, he could walk down to the crosswalk at Canton Avenue and Blue Hills Parkway and then walk back to Sumner Street. Didn't make much sense. So we got the bus stop moved. But that's how one little thing, like changing a stop sign and turning it into a traffic light, has increased the traffic on not only the Parkway, but Canton Avenue, and it's changed the speed incredibly. So this is just something I wanted to let you know. I think if you put a little more time into it, I'm sure that it can come out with a positive result.
Thank you.
I have one thing to say, that certainly the advertisement in the paper, which said,
Yep.
this is what it said about this hearing tonight. To see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 10 of the general bylaws, known as the zoning bylaws, by adding to Section 3 a new subsection, non-conforming business use. That's it. That's the notice the public got.
And then the public would have to get the Milton Times to see that.
And then they would.
Was it on their website?
What's that, the town's?
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was on the town website. Just a couple of things on the notice. We have legal obligations, and that's what Alex just read you to provide notice. So that's what was given from a newspaper standpoint. And I agree that the businesses should have been contacted. So that was definitely an oversight. So I apologize for that. That said, this board has made efforts to communicate meetings through Milton Neighbors on Facebook, through word of mouth, through, there's been articles covering this in the paper. So we do our best to give notice. I don't know how to communicate with the entire community of Milton beyond going through some of those channels, but you're absolutely right, we should notify the businesses.
Right, and even the businesses that are there, usually from 8 to 5, a letter.
Businesses should have been notified.
We open our mail every day.
Businesses should have been notified.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add that last night we asked for people who wanted to be notified about meetings to sign in with an email address or to contact Tim at his email address. And I will again just say that, Tim, your email address is on the town's website, correct?
I'm bringing it up right now.
Okay. We had a question about that last night.
I would simply point out that the clerk is maintaining a list of all the neighborhood associations, and I, as a member of one, do not receive a notice of this, and another avenue that you
Thank you. Ma'am, can you come forward, please? We have to, for TV, you have to have it into the mic.
I just have a suggestion. My name is Eleanor Jones. I'm a resident at 68 Concord Ave. The gentleman that's a business owner, I think that if they were informed, they could, as business owners, have maybe put up flyers or something, and residents could have had access to the information about this meeting or other meetings prior to the decision that was made. That's all.
Thank you.
I just have a comment.
That's a fantastic idea, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wants to speak to this issue? Sorry, we have one more. Mr. Corcoran, go ahead.
Thank you. Ned Corcoran, Precinct 3, and I am an attorney who often appears before this board and the Board of Appeals on issues like this. I think I was part of the notion of putting this type of a bylaw in place because I proposed something about a year ago, at least starting the discussion, and I applaud all of you for starting that discussion. I think it is an incredibly important discussion to take place through this process at town meeting and beyond. I think you as a board, individually and collectively, work extremely hard. These are not easy issues. They affect, as you can tell, they have emotional effect, they have economic effect on both sides of the aisle. And I think that the town needs to have a dialogue and wrestle with the notion of how to prevent deterioration in value of properties and areas around properties that are no longer being invested in, and to consider whether a bylaw proposal like this would create some level of incentive to reinvest in properties, because I think the loss of value affects not just the immediate property, but it has a trickle-out effect with respect to that. I think the notion of neighborhood involvement in the process is excellent. It probably needs to be more robust in its definition. I do take a little bit of, it's been suggested that I misrepresented the extent of neighborhood support perhaps for the ice house process. I'm not sure why. We met with the only process that you have to go through currently if you're going to so-called meet, whether you're going for a special permit or otherwise, is the notice only has to go to abutters. And legal abutters are defined as those within 300 feet of the lot line. So beyond that, the world is ignorant about what may or may not be happening unless the grapevine opens up. I think this notion that broader notice is a good one. With respect to the ice house in particular, I hosted 2 meetings of town meeting members in the affected precincts, one within a tighter circle and one more broadly. Lied on the fact that the town meeting members were elected to represent their constituents, and assumed that there would have been some level of dissemination of information with respect to that. If that didn't happen, and I didn't anticipate it, shame on me, but I reached out through all sorts of channels to try and make that happen. I was on television 7 times before it got to town meeting, understanding that we live busy lives and not everybody watches local cable access. Not everybody reads the Milton Times. There are different ways that people hear about things. But I was surprised that there was as little information as there was, because given the length of time that we were in front of this board and other boards and other processes talking about the ice house project in particular, that there was so little response. It's generally, bad news runs like wildfire. When people have issues or concerns, that gets out quickly.
Can you bring it back to this topic?
I will, and I just wanted, I appreciate that. I just wanted to bring that back around. But I do think that this is a very, very important matter for this board. It's a very important matter for town meeting to take up. The notion, the effect of the devaluation of property is significant, and the way that you can go about reinvesting in those properties with neighborhood inclusion and making that work is important. So I encourage the board to keep working on it. I will keep working on it with the board, with or without my clients, and I look forward to hearing the discussion at town meeting and beyond. So, thank you.
There was another comment in the second row, I think.
Brian, can I just make a quick comment? Sure. Well, I've got the Milton Planning Department website up on the big board right now. This is townofmilton.org. This is the town's website. If you go under departments, planning. This is me, Tim Serwinski. If I maintain a planning board update email list, I recognize some faces out there. Some of you are on it. I would recommend highly clicking on this Tim Serwinski link right here, sending me your email address. I'm very judicious about not spamming that list. You will not be inundated with messages, but if there is an important meeting on sort of town-wide planning board matters, we do send out that email list. If you're a town meeting member, we often will have Sue Galvin, the town clerk, who maintains the town meeting member email list, email town meeting members about meetings such as the one that happened last night, and also this public hearing. So if you're a town meeting member, I would encourage you to get on that list for her. I also know that she is also very judicious with that list and doesn't spam it very often, so you're only going to get the most important emails from her. So, and if you are a town meeting member, talk to your neighbors and spread the word.
I believe too, Tim, if you don't mind interrupting, there's also a public notices list that you can sign up on the town's website.
Yeah, so-
And they also send that out, so that's not just for town meeting members, that's for everybody. And it sends out notices of whatever's happening in town, including emergency notices.
We are also trying to let Milton Scene, which is trying to disseminate information in Milton about current events in town, give them notice so they get it out on the social media. So if you have other outlets for us, please let us know.
Absolutely.
Any more comments? I saw Joan first, and then we'll do Eugene.
Good evening. My name is Joan Giankarski. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 1, and I live on 75 Oak Street, which is within a half mile to 3/4 of a mile from, I believe, 5 of the proposed 18 properties that could be changing. First, a comment about town meeting email lists. It has become apparent to me, having been a town meeting member for only 4 years, that list has not been updated for 6 years, and that needs to be updated. Not every town meeting member receives the emails from Susan, and Susan Galvin. And number 2, an observation. I was at the Planning Board informational meeting last night, and I'm here again this evening. One is speaking about the benefits of the town on occasion and to development and the changing of this property. However, I did not see last night nor this evening a rallying by the abutters or by the neighbors of these properties, people who live on the block, people who live 2 blocks away, rallying and saying, great, let's move forward, this looks positive, we're on board. And there are many people who are abutters who have no idea of this plan. That's the observation I would like to make this evening.
Thank you. Jean?
Hi, everyone. Gene Irwin, town meeting member, Precinct 9. I apologize I wasn't at last night's meeting because I generally try to pay attention to these things. I was at a hospital meeting, and unlike this meeting tonight, the president of Milton Hospital and the chairman of the board had a meet and greet with a lot of the neighbors. Nothing was really on the agenda, but just so when something does come up, we could be ready. And I feel I try to pay attention, and as Alex pointed out, that little ad in the Milton Times didn't really tell me what was going on. I missed, as I say, last night's meeting, and tonight I didn't know there was a handout. I was here 15 minutes early. I'm sitting back there, and I feel this whole thing is too rushed. As a real estate agent in East Milton Square, and having grown up in this town, I agree with the last person. I don't hear any outcry for what a couple people on this board are proposing. And instead what I'm hearing, I had calls from lawyers and other real estate agents today, knowing that I generally attend these sorts of meetings. And they're asking me, Gene, they said one of the members is an architect for one of the sites that's being discussed here. Isn't that a conflict of interest? Is this meeting even legal? And I'm wondering, is this meeting legal? Have you had, town council weigh in, and is this appropriate? It seems that we do have other officials questioning, Milton's politics and ethics, and this seems awful rushed. Not only do I think abutters should be notified, I think some of the owners should be notified. I saw the Knights of Columbus, where it was basically a parking lot. I thought the owner there was proposing several condos. I don't know if you'd feel insulted that someone would say, oh, his idea's no good, let's just tear it down and make it a parking lot. I feel this is way too rushed. I don't think it's fair to the average citizen. I don't think it's fair to town meeting. I don't think it's fair to the town in general. I think things should be better advertised, and I don't think we should rush to do anything. Thank you.
I'll let Cheryl address the comment or question about the conflict.
I did have a conversation with town council, John Flynn, and he has sent an email addressing this. We had the conversation about this bylaw, whether it would, whether my involvement in the Blue Hill Ice site, which began about 6 months before I became a member of the planning board, whether that would have any influence on my judgment of this topic relative to the planning board. And since that work on that project pretty much ended for me at town meeting, because the project's not moving forward. Given the fact that there's multiple properties that would be affected by this, the fact that I'm not involved in a project that involves any of these properties, and the fact that it wouldn't influence my decision on this one way or another, his opinion is that there's no conflict of interest that I need to.
And I believe that now, Cheryl.
This can go into the record.
Thank you. And I didn't know at the Ice House, I knew Ned withdrew his thing for the moment, but I didn't know it was permanent. And that's quite frankly what I was hearing a lot of people saying, Gene, even the appearance of a conflict of interest is a conflict. And I think to a lot of people, fairly, it appeared to be a conflict. That's all. And I thank you for clearing that up.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Okay.
Good evening. Priscilla Hayden Sloan, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I drew up my own little notice, both for the discussion at town meeting and for last night's meeting and tonight's meeting. If I wasn't home on medical leave, I would not have been able to reach out to as many members of my neighborhood and my precinct. And I felt like I was running out of breath the whole time, because I think that the information, I have to agree, the information that you all are talking about that's so familiar to you, that's part of your probably breakfast conversation and lunch conversation and dinner conversation, and it feels so familiar to you, how it could be so foreign to some other people, and how it could feel like a freight train coming on very quickly. And so I think it's perspective taking. When I first heard about the Ice House project and I called Marion McKettrick, she was the one who explained that it had been in the work for 2 years. When I called Dennis Cohane, he was the one who told me that he had helped steer Ned and Cheryl in the direction of the project. So I've done a lot of homework and calling and reaching out to people, and I am a town meeting member, and I was not invited to the first gathering at the library, and I spoke to Ned directly about that, and so he widened the circle, and we were invited to the second gathering at the library. I just had surgery, so I wasn't able to attend, but again, I made sure that the town meeting members in my precinct knew about that meeting once I knew. But what I have learned going door to door and calling people is the majority of people right now do not get the newspaper, therefore they don't get the Milton Times or the Patriot Ledger where our notices seem to be going. There are still many people in town that actually don't rely on computer and internet, particularly in my neighborhood, whether that's an economic issue or an age issue. But I'm knocking on doors and people have not heard this information. And for those that are online and are on internet, there seems to be a disconnect between what we think is posted on the town's website and the general population knowing anything about the town having a website and knowing about what's on the website or how to navigate the website. So what I'm hearing is that people would like something dropped off at their door, whether it's when they move to town or when we go through a process that tells them right from the beginning where to find the information on a process. And again, I spoke at town meeting. Many of our neighbors in Precinct 10 and Precinct 1 never received their warrant in the mail. So, so if we're assuming the bottom line is you'll get the warrant, not even that happened. So I agree. I think we need to do a lot of problem solving around how we reach the general public. And the website is good for those people who know about it, but we have about 10 new neighbors just on our street, and no one even knew there was a website. And I'm telling people how to click on cable access and how to do this. I mean, I feel like the personal welcome wagon, and I don't really mind that, but I'm spending my money and my time putting together flyers. I'm knocking on doors. I'm ringing doorbells. I'm sending out emails. And I'm wondering, is this really my role as a town meeting member to bear the burden of the time and the cost? And when we're concerned about developers bearing the burden of time and cost to bring their projects forward, and what's the burden of the homeowner who pays $550,000 for their house and doesn't know that potentially a development is on a map with a pin on it, even before they bought their house. And that's what my neighbors are telling me as I'm ringing the bell. I moved here from a busy neighborhood because it was residential. I went to town hall and I found out if this store goes away, or if this church goes away, or if this school goes away, it's zoned residential. So I'll be safe. It will go back to houses. And now I'm knocking on their doors and telling them that's not really so. Citizens can put forward a petition to change zoning. Well, explain that to people. I've been explaining what is the role of the planning board to people. What's your jurisdiction? Why does it seem that the planning board is favoring developers and the progression of development over those of us who just spent all this money to buy a house in a residential neighborhood where there was no sign up that said this could change soon? And I said, those are great questions. So in terms of dialogue, this is a start, but because I was running around yesterday in the rain, dropping off my notice that I printed up, a lot of people were already busy tonight. A lot of people were busy last night, and a lot of people are busy next Tuesday for the Ice House. So what I believe is that we need to do more conversations with more publicity in more parts of town, because I do agree that the majority of these properties are in my neighborhood. And I have a very diverse neighborhood. Many languages are spoken, and the information only comes out in English. It's not in Spanish, and it's not in French. I'm not a Spanish speaker. I can wing it in French. But I'm having some very, very insightful and exciting and interesting conversations, but they're not making it to this forum. And I think you need to find some forays into the community. If you want to do house coffees and bring your information in, our house is open. That's what we've been doing, inviting everybody over so we can explain things to them. But even first-time town meeting members that I was calling about the special town meeting where we were looking at the Ice House zoning, understanding what is a special town meeting, understanding that the timelines are different, understanding that you didn't have to have the same amount of notice for any of the information because it was a short notice meeting, so everything is short notice, versus a regular meeting where you're supposed to have more time. But the special town meeting was their first meeting, and they felt completely run over by the bus because they had no idea how to get up to speed. So the other comment that I wanted to make is that it's probably a familiar term to you, and it's a fairly new term to me, but just the idea of the the concept of sort of the urban planning and the new urban movement and the urban development movement. And I think we need to be having that broader conversation, and the planning board needs to be sharing where and why your ideas are coming from and who's moving them forward, which age group is moving them forward, because we understand that a lot of this new zoning concept is coming out of the millennial group, who are maybe new residents to town and maybe are looking for something different than people who have been here 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 years. So I think you have some ageism that you need to bridge, as well as the multicultural and language issues. And when I look at the new urbanism information, it seems to me that, our planners of years ago actually had some really good ideas. We have some tight, developed neighborhoods, of which I live in. People are close together. There's good opportunities to meet your neighbors, which is what these housing units that we're looking at are supposed to create. There are a few small stores which we can walk to, so they had that in mind. There are lots of parks in Milton and open spaces that you can ride your bike to or push your baby stroller to. So when we say that the zoning that we have isn't working or that it's flawed, I think we should really look at it with the layering of what the new zoning concept is that we're trying to model after, and look at the zoning that came together in the 30s that maybe grandfathered in some of these non-conforming properties. But for the most part, many of those non-conforming use properties got their permitting because they were low impact on the neighborhood. And the only thing of lower impact was a house. And the reason that people had to go through a permitting process was that neighbors were allowed to decide whether or not a change of use created a greater impact than a house or a very quiet business. And I think when you take that permission away from people without first educating them about low impact and high impact and the way the zoning was originally created, it's adding to the confusion. And I know people were confused as to why you were meeting last night and tonight isn't it the same topic. So even the difference between a conversation and a public hearing. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments? Okay. What would like to do?
Well, I think it's, at least from,
Just a question first?
Yeah.
We received several emails. Were those read into the record?
Yeah, that's a good point. Sorry, Ned.
9 o'clock, I think you're supposed to open a public hearing.
We have an 8:30 that we haven't gotten to yet. We're still in our 7:30 or 7:15, Ned.
I thought it was the practice of the board to open and then continue until the prior one was real.
Okay, well,
It's fine.
we haven't done that tonight. We have an 8:30 that we haven't even opened yet, so.
yeah. And we still have 2 more articles.
Still have
for this
2 more
public
articles to
hearing.
go through.
So, with respect to the 9 o'clock, could I ask the board to open it and continue it
To our next meeting?
to our next meeting?
I don't have an objection
Any
to that.
objection to that?
Yeah.
Good. Can I have a motion to,
That would be you have to specifically name what it is. but
right, so can I have a motion to continue?
I have a motion to open said
Open.
hearing.
So
Open
can
the
we-
continued hearing on 1 Kinsale Lane.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And I would move that we continue the hearing on 1 Kinsale Lane to our next meeting, which is March 10th at, what time do you want to do it?
Tim is not here. I don't know what else we have on the
I
agenda.
don't think there's
at the
anything
moment.
else.
there's
Yeah, why don't we
nothing
do
else,
it?
we can do it at
7:15?
Yep.
So at 7:15 then.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so going back to the zoning article on non-conforming business uses, Cheryl had a question?
Just about reading the letters into the record, the 3 emails.
So, Tim, do we have any letters?
We do have a few letters that we've received on this subject. Some of them came from people that have already spoken, and I think that they've expressed those views. I have a letter from, an email from Tabor Keeley, who was on the master plan committee, right?
Okay.
He sent this in on Tuesday, February 23rd. I should read it.
Do you want it read in, or do you want to just accept it as part of the record?
What is the board's pleasure?
I think it'd be nice to hear it so that people who watch the maybe recorded version of this meeting would have the equal opportunity to hear it as well as what they heard
Works with what we've
live.
heard tonight about having transparency. So,
Right.
Tim, if you don't mind.
It's addressed to the chairman and the Milton Planning Board. Brian, given the description and stated purpose of the bylaw below, I support an effort such as this. This law doesn't encourage expansion of nonconforming uses so much as it gives current owners the incentive to reinvest in the property and potential buyers the confidence to purchase a nonconforming property. It is unfortunate that Milton doesn't permit reinvestment. Property values, residential and commercial, depend on market confidence. Buyers will not invest in or even maintain properties if property improvements and use changes depend on the whim of town meeting. There are a few properties at my end of town that would have been developed or properly maintained years ago if such a law had been available. 591 Blue Hill Avenue was a landscape supply and florist, complete with greenhouses. It has been vacant for over 15 years and been on the market for sale several times, most recently listed for over 18 months. This consistent vacancy blights the neighborhood, discouraging buyers interested in neighboring properties too. 1094 Blue Hill Avenue has also been underutilized for many years. The construction yard currently occupying the site is not attractive or beneficial to the neighborhood, and other than taxes, does not benefit the town either. While this new zoning wouldn't prevent 100% of these unfortunate vacancies from occurring, it would allow owners and prospective buyers to have the confidence that the problem could be overcome with a simple planning board hearing instead of town meeting. And Tabor Keeley was the writer of that. We also got an email from Paul Travers of Travers Insurance in East Milton Square. This is a short one. I'll read this in as well. Dear Brian, I am excited that the board is starting to look into zoning changes. As a member of the prior master plan, this subject was brought up time and time again at meetings from the residents. Being a resident as well as a landlord and business owner, I feel that in order to increase our tax base, as well as making the town attractive to new residents and small commercial operators, the changes are not only a smart idea, but a needed one in order to maintain smart growth. Hope I can attend the upcoming meeting, which unfortunately Paul was not able to be here. Please extend my thanks to the board for all their work and dedication. And then there's one more we just got this morning from, where did that one go? I have it. Oops, sorry. The Falcone family sent in a letter. The Falcones who own some property in East Milton Square. I have the letter right here. Excuse me. Dear Milton Planning Board members, the Falcone companies are in full support of the general zoning bylaw. We feel Brian Furs and Cheryl Tagayas did an outstanding job researching and developing this nonconforming business use bylaw. We are confident this will contribute to the economic growth and business development in our town. Sincerely, the Falcones.
Are there any other letters you didn't read that you can just announce who they were from, please?
So we also, we got a letter from Maggie Oldfield, who spoke, and I think she echoed a lot of the issues that she brought up in her letter when she spoke earlier.
One sec. Maggie, do you want your letter read in, or?
That's too long.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Marion McKettrick also passed along some comments. I don't know if she's here, if she wants to talk about those or not. That is it.
Do you want to read the letter in, or? Okay.
Thank you. My letter's long, and I don't want it read into the record, although it should be available if people want to read it. What I did was to read the original draft of the bylaw for nonconforming use, and I've also been asked a number of times over the last year and a half by various people who are trying to look at this issue to respond to other versions and other attempts, and it's very, very difficult to do this. And I want to say, you will not get response from the public unless you have something that they can respond to. So what the planning board has done here is that you have written something, and you have announced in whatever fashion you are able to that there is a bylaw change that might be going or will be going to town meeting, and in so doing, you have finally provoked some real discussion and feedback. And I know it's difficult for you as elected officials to sit here and listen to all these comments and criticisms when you've worked hard and you're tired and look how long the hearing takes, but you have to write something down, in my opinion, in order to get concrete and useful criticism. So what I try to do when I see a bylaw like this that's been written is to send an edited version back to the planning board. That's what I did. I had comments in there. And actually, some of the changes that the planning board's talked about were included in my comments. But in addition to that, I find it so valuable to have a public hearing, to be at the public hearing, to listen to comments, and always interesting to hear the comments about process and how do we know what's going on. Because I think you're really getting to the heart of it now. Now that you have a proposal, you're getting some attention. And I think neighborhoods, because you're talking here about pre-existing non-conforming uses, which are in neighborhoods, it's a peculiar proposal and a peculiar situation that requires an understanding of how each neighborhood functions and communicates in order to get to what you need to do. And in fact, you may decide ultimately you cannot do this for these 17 sites, that you have to do something that's divided up into categories of sites, or you may decide there is something that you can do, but it does need to be carefully drafted and worked over, and you will need to get the neighborhood input. And in the end, you cannot get something through town meeting unless you have strong support from the immediate neighborhoods around these sites. So you have to go through this process. I admire the fact that you've undertaken it and that you're trying to get discussion going. I hope you're not discouraged by the fact that there are lots of questions and concerns, because you couldn't get that feedback. I mean, you get general discussions when you have the planning meetings and the master plan discussion, but you cannot get beyond that unless you have something specific. That's my experience. So I don't need to have my letter read. If the planning board wants to put it on their website, they can, or they don't have to. My comments were about the original version, and you have some proposed amendments. Whether those go all the way to correct problems, I just cannot tell you right now, because it's obvious that there's now some real interest from the neighborhoods that are around these sites and the businesses. And I think everybody's probably, you can't think of everything, but as you've acknowledged, the businesses need to be involved in this discussion directly. Of course they do, they're the property owners. So there is more to be done. You'll have to make some decisions about how you want to proceed. But you have accomplished a lot by putting this before the town and giving me the opportunity, just for my benefit, to respond to something specific. It's very difficult to sit down and try to write something like this. So thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed listening to the comments tonight. I've learned a lot from it. I do represent people before town boards now as an attorney, and it's a whole different ballgame when you're applying the existing bylaw and you're trying to help an individual decide how to navigate through it. And it is indeed a different position to be in than being on a town board when you represent one party and the planning board's on the other side. So that's a different role for me. I'm not here in that capacity. I don't represent anybody in particular with relation to this bylaw. But I expect that it could happen in the future that I will have to. And so one of the things I do when I read a bylaw is to just try to figure out whether it makes sense, whether it's consistent, whether it contradicts other parts of our bylaw. I don't think I've finished going through that process and reviewing what you've written. And so from my perspective as an attorney and also as a town resident, I need to look at your bylaw that way too, as an attorney. So you need different kinds of categories of response. And it is an arduous process to go through, but it is worth it. I think I would imagine that there was a lot of work and discussion that went into the 1938 version of the Milton bylaws. And I think when you try to make a change, and this is a significant and very interesting type of change, which may or may not work well as a zoning change, because when you try to cite things where you have non-conforming uses, you're, by the very nature of those uses, those are uses that happened to be there before zoning was introduced. So you are in some way just talking about a different concept of zoning. And that's going to take a lot of study and reaction time. So I hope you're not disappointed by some of the criticisms. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to just respond to that quickly. You know, I think it's, I really appreciate what Ms. McKettrick just said. You know, as one of the two people that worked on this, it's difficult with public meeting law to participate in a participatory process with this entire board to draft something like this. And it's far too much for one person to take on. So based on town meeting law, we have two people working on this, almost on a subcommittee basis, and they're bringing it forward to the board for discussion. And many of the reasons that this was initiated was due to the master plan. There's been suggestions by some that there's some sort of hidden agenda here. There's a lot of things going on in the town right now that have created some situations that are putting people on different sides of issues, and that's fine, and that's what debate is all about. I hope that my fellow board members can hear what Ms. McKettrick just said and understand that we're trying to put something forward for discussion, and in certain circumstances I felt like those discussions have not been very productive, and I hope that we can be more productive with the understanding that we're just trying to accomplish something that we thought the town set out to do on a master plan. And to the extent that we can have productive discussions in this forum, that's helpful because we don't have another forum in which the five of us can have the discussion. So
I would like to say something. I don't believe we have ever discussed this bylaw. I don't believe we have ever had a meeting where you brought out the bylaw and said, look what I have, this is what I'm thinking about doing, what do you guys think? Just didn't happen. It didn't happen. You brought this in when, after the deadline for warrant article submissions, never talked to me. I've talked to no one about this since last summer. I wrote comments last summer. That was it. No one ever got back to me on my comments. No one ever said anything to me about my comments. I wrote some more comments, and once again, nothing. So I would suggest that discussion starts at home, and it should start here at the planning board, and it's unfortunate that we didn't have discussion before we had this public meeting, because it probably would have been helpful.
my only response to that, I think that we tried to have discussion about this. And the response that was given was that we disagreed about whether or not the bylaw made sense to put forward at all. And so therefore there was no discussion about the merits of the language, it was a discussion about the merit of the bylaw. And based on that, the bylaw was moved forward to town meeting without any discussion of the content of it, because there was no demonstrated willingness to discuss it. The comments were read and were frankly taken into consideration, but as I point out, we can't have conversations outside of this table. So I appreciate your comments, and I wish we could have had a more productive dialogue, is what I'm telling you.
I think we could have had a more productive dialogue.
Well, I hope we can have a more productive dialogue going forward.
I would hope so.
Cheryl's first.
Yeah, I mean, my comment would be that this board did make an effort to try and address articles. We agreed in which articles we were going to address last summer. We had a public hearing, and folks came in and said they thought timing wasn't good because people weren't paying attention over the summer, and that we needed to slow things down. So we had a busy agenda between the summer and the new year, beginning of the new year, in which we had many other matters before the board, and there wasn't time to take these up. We decided that because we were getting citizens petitions addressing zoning, which is something that we've been getting, that it was something to bring back to one of the things that we would look at. We decided that this and bed and breakfast would be two articles that we would spend some time thinking about. And I think it's always been the intent that we recognize it's difficult, and we recognize, as Marion said, that you have to start somewhere. And Ned has said the same thing. People who bring projects before this board, they have avenues that they look at. What process can we look at to do something with our property? Or if I want to sell my property, who could I sell it to and what could they do with it? Because that's going to determine the value. And so I think what we're looking at is trying to improve our process. So we are looking at, as what came out of the master plan is, the process by which zoning happens could be improved. So this is one of the steps we're trying to do. And the fact that this board has to have its conversations at this table in a public format with limited time to do it because of other agenda items does mean we have to do things back and forth via email. But I think it's always been the intent to get as much input and as much feedback as possible and continue to see whether this article is ready for town meeting or if it's something that we'll continue to work on and defer to another town meeting. I think that's always been the intent. But you have to start somewhere. And I think that's, others have said that, and I totally agree with that.
Ms. Innes.
So I think I want to clarify something that Cheryl just said, because it may have given the wrong impression by communicating by email. I think what you mean is we get the draft, we send our comments to Tim.
Right.
We cannot, other than
Correct,
the only two people who can work on it, we cannot go back and forth on this. I want to say that I am delighted by the number of people that came out tonight, by the variety of opinions that have been expressed. I thought having the informational meeting last night was very good, and I was pleased to see who came out. And again, the variety of opinions. I understand, at least I hope I understand, that we're planning some additional informational meetings. What I'm hearing tonight is that there's a clear need to continue to look at a lot of the provisions. And in fact, I've got a few things that didn't come up in tonight's meeting that I think need to be looked at. There's also an ongoing problem, and I'm really glad that it was brought out, because it was a problem that we had during the master plan. It's a problem that every town board who has tried to engage the public has, which is how do you reach the public? If they're not reading the newspapers and they're unaware of the website and therefore probably have cable access, and I can't believe that the warrant didn't make it to their houses. I was shocked when I heard that at town meeting. How do you get to people? And so the more information we get, or any board gets, that we're not reaching people, and the more somebody says, hey, you know, everybody in our area goes to such and such a business, put a flyer out there. That's incredibly helpful information for the board to know. And I work in a number of communities, and every community has a different way of getting the word out to people. So the more we hear back from you, we didn't hear X, but if you put it here, most of my neighbors would have seen it. That's incredible. And of course, for anybody who's involved in working on and understands town issues and is familiar with that, I think you almost have a duty to tell people what's going on. You know, if you have an email chain, just pass it on to them. I can't believe the efforts that you made to do your own flyers and hand them out. That's incredible. So I want to say I'm thrilled where this is going. This is obviously not something we can vote on tonight. I think it's more things that we need to work about. I think at our next meeting, obviously to continue the public hearing, but I think we need to set aside time where the five of us can continue to discuss our concerns with it. And maybe what we end up with is, hey, we're not ready to put anything forward to town meeting. But again, this is part of the process.
Right.
And I appreciate the work that the two of you have done. If you want to talk content now, I've got a couple of things, but I also know we've got B&B and others coming up.
Just some brief comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree. You know, it's before I say anything, it's appreciated the effort you put in. Anybody who puts a sincere effort in, whether I agree with them or not, I appreciate it. But some of the things that came to mind as we're going through this and that aren't addressed in the proposed new zoning is things that have come up in past meetings, and one of them being people have made comments that, you know, they moved into a residential neighborhood and they thought they knew what they were getting into. Completely unrelated to the zoning, but related to other issues that we've had come before us. And now if you have people that move into town, and I tend to like to use examples, if they move next to the Tedeschi's on Houston Ave, and it turns into completely different uses, like, oh, I didn't realize that could happen. Like, again, one of the people that come up said, there's no safeguard for people that move in to realize things could change significantly. One thing that I thought was a kind of negative tonight is I kept hearing a comment to the effect that people that it will most affect, referring to the business owners. Well, I tend to think the people that live around it and the people of the whole community of Milton will be very much affected. So I don't think that the business owners are necessarily the ones that are most affected by it. They may personally feel that way, but another comment I heard that I think our present system loans itself to is that I don't think we'd be totally adverse to a change in the business type, but certain areas of town and certain locations would loan themselves to certain uses where others may not. But if we have a zoning bylaw that says you can change and it blankets, then we really don't have a right to say to somebody, we'd prefer that, you maybe think of another use for that property because it just doesn't fit with the neighborhood, the people. It just doesn't, it's not a positive in a sense. And I just echo some things that people said previously, and that is that I think most of the people that I have spoken to over the years owning property in Milton have moved to Milton, and I guess I can't blanket it, a lot of people I spoke to have moved to Milton for the same reason. That is, it's an amazing, unique situation. Here you are with proximity to downtown Boston. I can decide to go to the Red Sox game at 7 o'clock at night at 6:30. But yet, I live in this community that's like rural. And that's the reason I moved to Milton. And, any additional commercial development or sudden changes or bylaws that could be, misconstrued and twisted by certain people, that's kind of tough. Then the last very brief comment, I just happened upon this book today, and it was a celebration of Brookline, its 200th anniversary in 1905. And I just started reading into it because my father was from Brookline, and he was a big booster of the town. But in the first paragraph, it talked about Brookline being one of the richest towns in America. And it said its property values are assessed so high, it said there's only one other community in Massachusetts that could even approach the property values of Brookline in 1905, and it said Milton. And people wrote bylaws in 38, and I think they preserved it. So I just, again, my final comment, I think, again, if we had an unknown number of properties that could, non-conforming business uses that we don't have a handle on, that we might have to write some parameters to head it off, to be proactive, like you say. But knowing that we can stick our fingers on 12, 15, 17, I think this process that's in place gives the most protection to the people and allows business people to develop something that would blend into the community.
Do you want specific content comments tonight?
It's the board's pleasure. I mean, I agree. I think at this point, certainly, we're not ready to make a vote this evening, and we have a lot more business to do tonight. So, I'd entertain a motion to continue this until
I just
March.
wondered if it would help in your revisions prior to the next meeting. I've only got about 5 or 6. They're quick.
Yeah, we can take them.
Okay. All right, so obviously clarify B&B and how that would
Yep.
affect, and that sort of leads into the next one.
Actually, before we go there,
Yeah.
I'd like a clarification from the board as
yeah.
to which bylaw we would like to work from. Alex raised a good point last night,
Yes.
which is that we have a bylaw submitted, but
Right.
we have a proposed modified bylaw coming from Cheryl and from me. So the question is, where are we going to have our comments? What are our comments going to be addressing?
Well, from a personal opinion, I think there's a couple of things, and Alex brought up one of them last night, which is as we look at changes, so we've got the one on the warrant, and we have to understand the implications of the one on the warrant, because
Correct.
it may be that what we have to say is, please send this back.
Yep.
I think at some point, we are going to need a confirmation from town council as to how far we can change the scope
with
of the
that.
article. So I'm comfortable moving forward, I personally am comfortable moving forward with our discussion on the revisions. I would expect to see continual revisions between the town and town meeting, because I would not be comfortable voting for the current bylaw. I mean, I was happy to put it on the warrant because that meant that we could have these conversations, but I would not vote for it as so I would prefer to continue with the idea of revisions.
And I would
don't know
agree
if
with
you
that.
guys
I'd like
agree.
to work with the modified version. I don't support the original version anymore to identify some of the unintended consequences. However we vote on it, I'd like to continue any discussions we have. If we have further discussions on this, I'd like to continue them on a modified version.
Yeah. And I would suggest that what we should, and in fact, it's one of my comments, is we should put on the planning board page, we should set up, here's what's on the warrant, and then we should clearly identify revised drafts, maybe with, this was discussed at this meeting, this was discussed at that meeting, so that the public can follow along any revisions that we make. Sort of what we were hoping for last summer, but didn't quite happen that way. So, with that, clarify B&B. I actually agree.
But let's finish that. Let's finish the,
What we're talking about?
Well, I don't think B and B should be included, so we need to make sure that however that it's
B and
written.
B shouldn't be included in what?
In the non-conforming bylaw, we should not
Oh,
allow.
no. I mean, it seems to me that the Brian's and Cheryl's work, I mean, we can use that as a basis, but it
Right.
does seem to me that it isn't, let's change this word. We're using it, but we're going to encourage ideas.
Yeah, sure.
That can be, they don't have to be sitting here in the document. They can be ideas that are floating in the ether. You take down, you write them down, you can email them to Tim, and we will consider them. And they don't, and of course the modification will be on the website.
Yep.
And we will make it very clear that it is a document. There are, and you list what the changes this document may propose to make in the original document, and say what other changes are there.
I like the idea of having a summary page at the beginning that says, these are the changes we've received, this is how it changes the language, so that somebody looking at it quickly can just see that summary on the first page.
Using the original bylaw, because most of the changes occur on the first page. And then there are a few other changes as you go along into it. But most of them are on the first page, and if we use the original bylaw and then list all the changes that we think should be made, then it seems to me we've got a better sort of approach.
Agreed.
Yeah, I also think one of the things that we ought to do is, because we're going to be gathering input from the board members and from the public, if there are proposed changes that are in conflict with each other, that should also be identified. So we can come through and say, okay, somebody has recommended that we do X and somebody has recommended that we do Y. And
You're seeing the
Tim is looking very exciting about that.
It's my job.
Good attitude, man.
Something that Mike said struck a chord with something I'd written down earlier, which is, we've been talking about, is this a neighborhood benefit if we allow certain uses in the neighborhood? And I think we really need to look at reducing the number of uses allowed to those that are neighborhood specific. So rather than saying everything in the business district except X, Y, and Z, I think what we should say is what should be allowed is X, Y, and Z, and specifically identify those, because there are uses that are not appropriate for a residential neighborhood. I think adding a more specific neighborhood process and delineating that makes a lot of sense. I agree that we need additional specificity on standards. Alex mentioned traffic last night, which is not well defined at the moment. And I should note, there's a lot of data on current traffic conditions in the master plan, and that might be something that's useful to quickly review. It'd be in volume 2, existing conditions. And then finally, for tonight at any rate, I reserve the right to further comment, a couple of the sites include buildings that could be considered historic. The Knights of Columbus site was one that we discussed when proposal came before of us. Bent's is another one. And I think we ought to be careful, because if anything, just to use Bent's as an example, doing anything that might encourage taking Bent's down would definitely be an impact on the neighborhood that would be considered negative. So I think we need to figure out how we protect historic buildings that contribute to the character of the neighborhood, the physical character of the neighborhood, or that continue development patterns that were originally established. And is that some form of bonus where we reduce down what would be allowed, but provide a bonus to preserve the historic? I don't know yet, but we should just consider how that works. So, and then I've got some comment on structure of the presentation, but those I'll forward to Tim since he has the document. So,
Yes,
thank you.
I passed that off to him, thank God.
A question that, again, relates to intelligent remarks I heard from the public. People see things as very foreign. The language of the bylaws right off the bat to some people is very foreign. And I honestly, I'm not trying to throw a monkey wrench on anything, because we have said it as a planning board before, you got to get us something a week ahead of time for us to have a decent chance to digest it, whether it's a plan or.
Agreed, yeah.
It strikes me that if we keep manipulating, whether I agree with this plan or I don't, bylaw, up until the nth hour in April, it seems unfair to ask people to vote at it or at that point. It seems to me you should have a situation where you say, whatever, just using dates, by June 15th, this is what we consider our final draft. Now you have 2 months to study it for the plan. We're not going to make revisions to it, but now you have 2 months to sit on it, give it out to the general public, digest it, see what you think about it. We're not going to change it. That's the final draft, but you've got a fixed period of time to look at that final draft and say, do I agree or don't I agree? Because if I walk into a meeting where something's been changed up till, the 2 days ago, it's like, well, what do you mean? Do I agree or don't I agree? I don't know. I thought I did at one point, but will you change that?
But they can't, because when the warrant goes to press, it's very unlikely the warrant committee is going to do a pink sheet on this one. Very unlikely, in my view. And it does seem to me that when we get to a agreed draft, we should have a public hearing on it.
I was just going to suggest we continue this
Continue
public
this
hearing until we're done until we come to that final decision
So
that we're ready to
continue
vote.
it generally?
Yeah, continue it.
With then the notion that we will set a date once, see what happens on March 10th in our discussion then.
Yeah.
And,
We'll need to make some vote on
and
March
then
10th.
if we
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
something, we could go for, I think that's all right.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Well, yeah, I think if you had something in hand a month before the April town meeting.
No, I mean, we'll discuss it.
Don't make it too fast.
May, oh.
As I understand it, the board will discuss it on the 10th.
Right.
And then if we formulate something which is, we say this looks like it's final, then we can bring the public in. We can circulate it and bring the public in with notice.
So could we consider asking, and it's nice and public here, maybe we can send out another email blast, asking members of the public to send in their comments by a date that then allows us to review them before March 10th, so that anybody who wants to submit written comments has submitted them by.
I mean, they should be able to
March
submit them whenever they do.
Well, I just want to make sure,
but
that's true, but I just want to make sure that we have the ability to read them before March 10th.
If people know that we're going to discuss them on March 10th, I think they've got an incentive.
That's a good point.
And my point was beyond even comment or changes. My point was just having a document in place for a period of time.
Yeah, absolutely,
So
I
when you
agree.
walk in to vote on something, you say, you can, even as just a citizen who's not necessarily a town meeting member, you could advise your town meeting member, I've read through this and I agree with it.
So I
Or
think
I've
we
read through
need
this
that
and I
cutoff
disagree with
date,
it, X
yeah.
reason or Y reason or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Well-
if it's not in place for a while, it's hard to go into the meeting with something that's you've seen 2 days ago and say,
Yeah.
for it or against it. It's like, Ice House example, I thought a lot of people were for it, then all of a sudden, a lot of people against it. And they had good reason, but it has to sit out there for a minute or a period of time to
So then I
digest
think,
it.
continuing it to March 10th and then making that decision of, is this something that we're prepared to go forward with, or do we need one more meeting? But whatever, that would give us till the end of March, and then that would give a full month plus before town meeting. Yeah.
The deadline for the warrant committee going to press is
I'm not on the warrant committee.
the end of March. You haven't heard
It's
from
the
them?
end of March, though. It is the end. We're currently scheduled to be in front of the warrant committee March 16th. So March 10th is an important date, but we can figure that out as we get to March 10th.
Well, I think just, may I just
Yeah,
follow up on that?
absolutely, yeah. I had a motion, so.
Oh, just to Mike's point, that I do think
forward
zoning is complicated, it's particularly the kind of language that goes into the zoning. So I do agree that it's better not to have many, if any, revisions on the floor,
agree.
because it's too complicated to go through. So that's why there's been a great push. Brian and I have spent a lot of time on this in the last couple of months, and we'll spend a lot of time on it between now and when it has to go to press to the warrant committee. so that we can get as good an article as we can in the printed warrant that goes out to people, so that when they come to town meeting, that they will be prepared, and they'll have opportunity to hear about it without this obtuse language by coming to a hearing.
May I have a motion?
Yes, but I have two questions
Okay.
beforehand. I'm sorry.
gonna
They're
beg
very
for-
quick questions.
beg in a minute.
Was anybody here going to speak to the bed and breakfast?
I was going to ask the same question.
Okay, that was question number one. And question number two, was anybody going to speak on the technical amendment to subsection L of section 3, changing it to subsection P? Okay. So this is what I would like to do, and we'll see if there's any objection. I would like to continue this hearing to March 10th at, we've just done something at 7:15 to 7:45. And by continuing that hearing, that would continue also the discussion of bed and breakfast. But I don't want to cut anybody off who wants to talk about that tonight.
Moving bed and breakfast to March 10th as well.
Yes, so that, and then the other thing is if nobody wants to talk to subsection L, it's a technical amendment, I think we could hit that tonight.
Yes.
Okay, so then the first motion is to move, continue the public hearing on the zoning articles for the non-conforming business use and bed and breakfast to March 10th at 7:45.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then my second motion is to recommend to the warrant committee and to town meeting that they pass the article that says to see if the town will vote to amend section 10 of the general bylaws, known as the zoning bylaws, by redesignating subsection L of section 3, assisted living residence development, ALRD, article 43 on the May 2013 warrant as subsection P of section 3.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I think we got a new town moderator. All done.
I hear she's available.
Didn't stumble once.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I just, before people start clearing out, townofmilton.org, under boards and committees, M through Z, Planning Board. This is the Planning Board website. At the bottom of the page, under links, this is where all of the May 2016 zoning articles will be housed. By tomorrow, by 1:30 at the latest, there will be the revised copy of this article that the board's been talking about. It'll be very clearly described and linked to on this page. If you're not a computer person and you're watching, my phone number is 617-898-4969. Please call me, and I will walk you through anything that you need walked through, or come visit
You're
us.
going to list the specific changes
Oh, yeah.
from the...
They'll be very specifically labeled and listed.
Okay, good.
And, so.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. They were very helpful. Okay, we have some other items, but we're going to move now to our 8:30 public hearing on 545 Adams Street site plan approval. Is the applicant here for 545 Adams Street?
Thank you.
Get out of here early.
Are these approved to sign?
Hang on. We still have to open and continue it.
Oh, okay.
Just making sure.
But I'd sign it.
And then can we do the minutes tonight and just get those
We're
done?
going back.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Just
I-
wanted to
we-
double
We went
check.
right into the public
No,
hearing.
I know.
Going back,
For
I've got
obvious
'em.
reasons, yeah.
I've got them.
Excellent.
We have a happy news for Mike as well.
A what?
May
Oh,
appoint
that's
you to a
right.
committee. Put it on your resume, Mike. Do we have an applicant here? Oh, there you are.
they're
Okay,
coming
great.
in.
Please step forward.
Well, while he's doing that, can we quickly
Yeah, why don't we
discuss
quickly
Mike's...
check off two things. First of all, we have I skipped over the approval of the minutes. I have minutes here for June 18th, June 18th, 2015, January 5th, 2015. It should say 2016.
Yeah.
That's a change. And January 21st, 2016.
I've reviewed them. I'm happy to move the approval of all three. if
Okay, I have a
everybody else-
modification that there is a typo that,
Amended.
of the, as amended with.
As amended.
Okay.
So,
Alex, any comments on
What
this?
is the typo?
It's just the
2015
the very
instead of
top, it says
2016.
January 5th, 2015.
Oh, the date.
Yeah.
No, I have no comments.
okay.
So
I've
motion-
moved them, yep,
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
excellent.
And move into our public hearing. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is George DeLagas. I'm the architect for the project. This is 545 Adams Street.
Tony Capichetti with Hayes Engineering out of Wakefield, Mass., the engineer for the project.
Can you just swing the mic around so it's in front of you? Thanks.
Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. The project you have in front of you is an existing Dunkin' Donuts located at 545 Adams Avenue. The site is a small parcel of land. It's currently got an existing Dunkin' Donuts on it. It runs through to Granite Avenue. It's on the southerly side of Adams Street. What the applicant is proposing is to remove an existing vestibule area to the rear of the site, located right in this location here, and add a walk-in cooler freezer. And also do interior renovations, upgrade the ADA accessibility to the building. And because the overall renovations to the building itself will be greater than 800 square feet, we're in front of you for a special permit. The overall increases are pretty minor. The walk-in cooler freezer is 114 square feet total in footprint area. And the net increase in impervious area to this site is 81 square feet. That has no effect on curb number of the site, which therefore means there'd be no increases of amount of rate of runoff or volume of runoff from the site. The use would be consistent with its current use, and it is overall a fairly minor upgrade to the facility.
Is that it?
Pretty simple. We're adding a handicap ramp in the front. Currently, it's inside the building. But we're not violating any of the zoning regulations.
Questions from the board before we go to the public?
No, not yet.
I have one, I just didn't hear what you said. On the freezer, you said it is a increase, what's under there now? Is it mulch today?
Currently, there's a vestibule area that the current handicap access goes into, and there's a
So
series
there's
of
no
doors.
net increase in impervious area?
81 square feet.
Yeah, it is a little
Okay,
bit.
so, and that's mulch today or something?
Yeah, it's either mulch or other landscape.
Okay, understood, all right, thank you. Anybody here to speak to the public hearing? Sir, if the applicant could step back, just to allow the public to use the microphone.
Yeah, Tony McDonald, 4 Mechanic Street. I have concerns, I have major concerns here. Why do we need bigger freezers? You know, I mean, what's going on here? You know, I mean, we have a restaurant across the street. There was a bus stop that never moved. It opened 2 months ago. The traffic is horrendous down there. And now you're putting in more freezer space. It's for what? Are we attracting more customers? Is that what we're going to do? More traffic? I'm a little concerned about what's going on down here. It seems nothing gets implemented that's supposed to be implemented. I don't know if anyone's been down there on a Friday night, Saturday night. It's a horror show. Horror show. You can't move. Deliveries, all times during the day. The buses there, traffic can't move. It's at a standstill during the days. It's awful. So my concern is that we're getting another freezer here. It's quite large. Why? Why are we doing this? Are we planning on expanding more business? I don't know. Seems to me that they were getting along fine with what they had. Why are we expanding? Questions?
Doesn't everyone want to expand their business?
Nice if you have the room. It's nice if the area can handle it. And, you know, like I said, there was a bus stop that was supposed to be moved, that wasn't even moved. It's still a problem there, a serious, serious problem. And that wasn't done, and that restaurant's open for 2 months now. And now we get somebody who wants to expand freezer space?
But they do have an exit onto Granite Avenue.
Right, I'm aware of that. I'm talking about the more traffic that's going to come here. Why are we doing it? I don't know why they're doing it. Only to attract more business.
They want to have more sandwiches. I mean, who knows?
Right.
Careful about the back and forth.
It's attracting more businesses, yeah. So we can have a larger menu. We can have, you know, attract more people. We can do different types of food, Italian and Chinese or whatever. So with a bigger freezer, we can stock more.
So can we let the applicant respond to the question?
Sure.
Thank you.
We are remodeling the store. We have to remodel it every 10 years. So whenever we do that, we look to improve the layout, and we are creating a longer a front line to make it much more convenient. Right now, it's not working very well. We do have a cooler and freezer in the basement. Of course, this used to be a bank building. It's not really conducive to Dunkin' Donuts. Not very practical. They have to go up and down and so on. So with this remodel, we'd like to bring all of the food upstairs.
So this is replacing a basement freezer?
Correct. So
The size of that basement?
It's about the same size as this one. This is a cooler freezer. Most of it is freezer actually, and about a third of it is cooler. But we're merely replacing what we already have, and we're shutting the one in the basement down.
These are stock units that you call a manufacturer and they ship them out. It's not like a custom fabrication for this site only. They come in standard sizes, so it's not.
So what's the, may I ask a question? Yeah. What's the material of the freezer unit? The finished material that we would be seeing in the public?
It's aluminum, the silvery-looking cooler freezers.
And I don't see a height on the drawing.
It's actually 8 feet. The actual cooler is 8 feet. Overall, it ends up being 8 foot 8. I think we provided, what I have one here as well, a revised plan that shows that. On top of that cooler, 2 more feet, there are 2 compressors, one for the cooler, one for the freezer. So overall, if you include their small compressors, it's about 10 feet.
And is there a lot of noise generated by these compressors? No. And so you have information on the compressors as well?
I can provide it, but they're not they're noisy.
And it's only accessible from the interior?
Correct.
The freezer unit?
Correct. It butts up against the building. There's a door right there. Correct.
I know that the interior renovations are not part of our scope, but just a quick question. Are you increasing seating capacity or the ability to serve people are you increasing any sort of capacity by your interior renovation?
We're increasing the seating. I believe now we can fit around 24, 25. It's hard to tell from what the original design, what we're actually, how the new one compares, but we'll have 34 seats.
34 seats.
And that's part of the improvement. We want people to be able to sit down.
Okay.
Not quite sure. I think probably 24, 25.
So you're talking about
24,
10?
25 is the number.
Right.
Okay, so you're talking about an additional 10
Right,
seats, roughly.
Roughly. And the current layout is not the original layout, so we're not quite sure how it was originally designed. But the idea is to improve the customer experience. We don't expect to get more customers because we're limited with the parking, obviously. We tried, or we looked into putting a drive-through, and it didn't seem to be possible. But we are not reducing parking. It's the same number of parking spaces, so nothing else is
So that's
changing.
limiting your...
It's limiting, correct. It is it's a difficult area in terms of parking. We thought, not that this is the subject of this hearing, but we thought that the drive-through might have helped because now people are parking, running in, leaving sometimes the car is in the middle of the driveway, running in, running out, so it's not a, great situation. But anyway, that's a separate issue. But we're not doing anything negative as far as impacting the parking. The traffic's still the same.
Thank you.
Gerald, did you have a question?
Is the entrance from this side of the building going to be maintained? I was trying to understand if that was just an employee entrance, or is that a public entrance?
That was actually a service entrance, which was, this is how we have been using it. We're closing that off. That was used when the building was used as a bank. There are two drive-through lanes. We're not using the one next to the building. Obviously, there's a bank that uses the drive-through still, but that's just kind of a dead area. We are planning to remove the canopy that's there, which was part of the bank.
But it does mean that people who park in the lot now have to walk up the drive to the front to enter.
No, there's actually there's an entrance in the rear
Still,
still.
I had that question. If I see it.
Yeah.
There's a rear door.
Yeah.
There's an entrance
Okay.
from the rear still.
That's what I was trying to understand. Okay,
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying that.
Yeah, I was gonna. And is that the door you load through?
I'm sorry?
Is that the door you load through?
No, we're gonna be using the one from the rear directly. Yeah, the one from the side is not practical. It's
That's
not
what I'm speaking about. You're loading from the door in the rear.
in the rear, correct? Yeah, that's the new design. That's a new right. It's much safer and more practical.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Clark, what do you got for us?
The only reason this is before you is because of that freezer on the back. That's what's making this go over the 800 square feet.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That was it.
Okay.
Because it used to be an outside, more or less, canopy or vestibule, and now it's part of the building. So it increases the footprint of the building itself, usable occupancy space in the building. I'm just
What they're
deciphering
changing on
what
the
you said,
outside
but
of the
I'm trying to-
building, if they change more than 800 square feet of the outside of the building, they need to come for site plan approval. And by adding that freezer, they've tripped over 800. Just doing the doors, they don't reach the 800.
So we need that.
So what we're approving, can you just clarify what we're approving tonight? There was just a question.
Changing the front facade from right now, they've got the doors that, the folding doors. Those will go away. There'll be a ramp that comes in. On the back, you're changing it from, again, the double doors to a single door. A different piece that you didn't talk about that actually is happening inside the store is, if you look at the store right now from the street, you see the counter. When they redo the store, they'll turn it 90 degrees so that you can see through the store on there once they remodel the store. By doing it, it actually adds a safety factor to it for the public safety. If a policeman drives by, he can see right through the building. He can see into it. He sees what's happening. Right now, he sees just what's here, but he can't see down that alley. He can't see around the back door.
Okay, so we'll have that activity,
public-
from the street level, we're gonna have some
Yes.
activity there that's really missing at the moment
Yes.
because it's so blocked. Okay, that's a huge difference,
Yes.
actually.
Any other additional comments from the public?
I think we have identified there's a missing dimension that would have to
I agree with that.
be addressed.
So
So a spec sheet, we need a spec sheet for the freezer?
Especially for the freezer, especially for the condensers. I'd like
Just
to
to add
see
to
a
the-
measurement of the height on the plan, which I think you said you may have added on a.
Yeah, we did. It's actually 8'8", and I do have a version that has it, but I might as well submit everything together.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And
makes
I don't see the condensers shown on the plan.
It's not. It's right on top of the freezer cooler itself. That's why I want to show them on the elevation as well, so you can see how big they are.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
That's helpful, yep,
Yeah.
thank you. Anything else from the board? Okay, do I have a motion?
Been making them all. Does somebody else want to make a motion today?
You're doing a good job, Emily.
Oh, thank you very much. So with the caveat that we are waiting for that additional information that, for the spec sheets for the condenser unit and the refrigeration unit, and for the plans to be amended as just discussed, I move that we approve the site plan application for 554 Adams Street. And assuming somebody will be writing this up?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, and I guess my only discussion would be you're going to look at the spec sheet for us, make sure that it's consistent with what we've been told tonight.
I have an amendment to my motion. I move that we close the public hearing on 545 Adams Street prior to
Thank you,
doing the
former
site
chair.
plan approval.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time.
Very much.
We didn't vote yet.
Oh, you.
So can I
you
have
did.
can I have a vote, so all in favor of the amendment, do we have a second on the amended motion?
We did. We just did that.
Okay, can we vote on it then?
Yes.
All in favor?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
So you just
Thank you
email
again.
me.
Okay, now you say thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, we have one more item for tonight. Should be very, very quick.
Two more items.
2 more items tonight, sorry. All right, I can't
chair's
speak to the
keeping-
quickness of the next
checking
one.
that whip.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well,
No
while
offense,
they're-
Paul, we're just a little.
While they're moving
while we're
around, why
moving
don't we
forward.
do,
So we need to, we currently have a telecommunications design review committee member on our board. It's Mike Kelly, and his tenure expires in February. I would like to suggest that he be renominated for the position.
I think that's a grand idea.
should we should ask, Mike, do you want to do you accept it? Is that a yes, that you
Yes,
accept
yes,
the
yes.
renomination?
All right, excellent. All in favor?
Aye. And just to warn you that come April, you will have to appoint a new liaison to the capital planning committee.
How many times have they met?
You don't want to know.
Okay. We're discouraging
It is a
you.
fantastic
All right.
committee, you're going to
I'll
love.
bring the straws.
Unfortunately, I'm already on the
Mr.
telecommunications.
Sullivan, we're waiting for you. Sorry, maybe we didn't make that clear.
We're getting punchy.
And this is an informational meeting, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, so this is old business. This is further informational presentation on 591 Blue Hill Avenue, which we've actually heard about earlier tonight as the former garden center, I believe it was, or greenhouse.
Greenhouse, florists.
Oh, welcome back.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. On January 21st, I was back before the Board of Appeals. I submitted an application for a special permit at this site for 232,000 square foot lots. And in addition, I requested a variance from the requirement that a private way shall not be a street with respect to any lot which does not have deeded access to and over such way. The Board of Appeals granted the special permit and the variance. The written decision, from what I understand, was just completed. It hasn't been signed yet, but I expect it'll be available come Monday. I haven't seen it yet, but my intention is to file an approval not required plan for the 2 lots. Due to the special, this is a resident A zone, but due to the special permit that was issued by the Board of Appeals, I'm only required to have 32,000 square foot lots under zoning. So we have 32,000 plus square foot lots. And then I'm required to have 150 feet of frontage for each lot. On Lot 1, the frontage is on Blue Hill Avenue. There's 150 feet of frontage. And then on Lot 2, the frontage is derived from Perkins Lane, which was approved by the planning board in 2005 in a 2-lot subdivision. There's a single home that was built at 610 Brush Hill Road address, but its frontage is on Perkins Lane. And then there's the existing house that was at the top of the street, which is so the 610 house is right here. It's a new home that I built. And then the existing home was preserved, and there was an addition plate put on it. The 614 home has frontage on Brush Hill Road, and the 610 home has frontage on an improved Perkins Lane. So I asked the owner of 610 for permission to claim frontage on their lane, which they've agreed to grant. In addition, they've agreed to grant a right of emergency access down their lane to Lot 2. Lot 2 will have no rights to go up Perkins Lane. Its access point will be Blue Hill Avenue down this strip of land that's goes to the street. There's about 11 feet of frontage here. And that's about it. There was, the Adamses in Lot 2, there was a combined of 139 feet of frontage there. So I went to the neighbor at 608 Brush Hill Road that lives off of Hume Lane, and he'd agreed to exchange approximately 50 feet of land, two little triangles, which created 11 feet more frontage for Lot 2 on Perkins Lane, which brought it up to over 150 feet of frontage. So, as I said, my intention is, once the decision is recorded with the clerk's office, to file an A&R plan. So I wanted to get a sense of the board if there was any questions or issues they might have with this plan.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or sense from the board for Mr. Sullivan?
I'm just curious, you said that they'll have 150 foot of frontage on Perkins Lane on this section, the improved section.
It's a combination of probably the end of the improved section and then the gravelled way.
But then you went on to say that they won't have rights to
No, that's what the...
access and ingress and egress to their land from that.
Correct. They'll have, yeah, that's what the variance was granted for, the requirement to have access to that lane. Their preference was that Lot 2 didn't have access, the Adamses.
Paul, so looking at Blue Hill Avenue, and just to make sure that I'm reading this properly, you've got that long strip of land going to Lot 2. So that's going to be the access to Lot 2?
Yeah,
the end of it there?
This lot is actually made up of, I think I've given you a plan in the past. It's a 1929 plan, and there was a 15-foot strip that runs all the way from front to back.
Okay.
So we basically are using that strip to give access to the back lot.
So then at where it intersects with Blue Hill Avenue, how wide is that? Because it looks like it's saying 10.
Yeah, it's a little 10 and a half feet.
10 and a half
there,
feet?
yeah.
Okay. So what width driveway were you thinking was going to go there?
It would be the maximum. We may also create a driveway easement right here.
Okay.
For Lot 1, so we could widen it.
All right, because obviously in addition to the homeowner accessing it, you've got to make sure that anybody else who needs to,
Sure.
God forbid, a fire truck, but possibly, Amazon.com or, whoever's delivering.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And there's an existing curb cut here, too. That's where we're
Okay.
coming out. That's already there.
They're not going to use Perkins Lane even when they get down to Blue Hill Ave.
No, they don't need to. They own that strip of land. I want them to have their own land. Only have their own driveway.
And sorry, how does Lot 1 access, how does Lot 1 get in? Do they also have an existing curb cut?
Yeah, there's another curb cut on the other side that's right here.
Okay,
So there's a circular driveway.
all right.
And we're using one of the curb cuts here, and the other one would be right there. So, at the public hearings for the Board of Appeals for my application, there was 4 neighbors that showed up, and they all supported the application. There was no opposition at all at the hearing. Pretty much all the abutters and the neighbors in the area just want to see these buildings removed. They're tired of looking at them. Last winter did a lot of damage to the buildings, and they're in worse shape than they've ever been.
Anything else from the board? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe just a warning, Paul, March 10th is looking awfully busy. You might just keep that in mind when you look at your timing.
Looking for a motion to adjourn.
Since I'm doing the motions today, I move that we adjourn.
Second? Second? I thought so. All in favor?
Aye. We've got